Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the gold-ranked sage, the healer who saved Sword Maiden's soul, Naruto x Sword Maiden, Goblin Slayer. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Golden Sage's Arrival. Golden light filtered through ancient forest canopy, dappling the moss-covered ground where a lone figure stood motionless. Eyes closed, Naruto Uzumaki breathed deeply, drawing natural energy into his body. The familiar sensation of sage mode washed over him, heightened awareness expanding outward like ripples on still water, revealing every living creature for miles around. There, 500 yards northeast, the beast was moving. A smile touched his lips as orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes. In this world so different from his own, sage mode remained his most reliable ally. Adjusting the green cloak that marked him as a gold-ranked adventurer, Naruto launched himself forward through the trees, moving with practiced silence. The Elderwood Forest had claimed 17 lives this month alone. The beast responsible, classified as a mythic tier threat, had evaded 3 separate hunting parties. Most adventurers would consider this suicide, venturing alone against such an opponent. But then, most adventurers weren't him. Naruto landed on a thick branch, pausing to assess. The massive creature moved through the undergrowth below, each step shaking the earth. Scales like polished obsidian caught what little sunlight penetrated the canopy, its serpentine body stretching nearly 40 feet. The forest drake was even larger than reported. Well, that complicates things, he muttered, forming a familiar cross-shaped hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 4 perfect duplicates materialized beside him in puffs of smoke, each bearing the same determined expression. You know the plan, Naruto told his clones. Distract, assess, contain. No unnecessary risks. The clones nodded before dispersing in different directions. Naruto watched them go, mentally calculating angles of approach. The guild had requested the drake be captured alive if possible. Its scales contained rare alchemical properties more valuable when harvested from living specimens. Killing would be easier, but Naruto preferred challenges. He'd spent 3 years in this world adapting his shinobi techniques to its unique rules and creatures. The blending of his chakra abilities with this realm's magic had created something entirely new, something that had earned him both fame and suspicion in equal measure. The first clone engaged, leaping into Drake's field of vision with a flash of golden chakra. The beast roared, rearing back as another clone approached from behind. Naruto observed the creature's movements, noting its reaction time, blind spots, and defensive patterns. Impressive speed for something so large, he murmured, watching the drake's tail shatter a tree as it whipped around. And those scales are deflecting basic Rasengan attacks. A clone's memories flooded back as it dispersed under the drake's massive claws. Naruto winced, phantom pain ghosting across his consciousness. The beast's hide was tougher than expected, resistant to both physical impact and chakra penetration. Time to try something different. Focusing chakra into his palm, Naruto formed a swirling ball of energy, but unlike the standard Rasengan. He infused this one with natural energy from his sage mode. The sphere pulsed with green-gold light, tiny seals spinning within its core. Sage art. Binding Rasengan, he whispered, the technique unique to his time in this world. Naruto dropped from the branch, landing silently behind the drake as it battled his remaining clones. With precise timing, he thrust the modified Rasengan between 2 scales at the base of the creature's spine. Rather than exploding with destructive force, the energy sphere pulsed, sending tendrils of golden chakra spreading across the drake's body like luminous vines. The beast roared, thrashing violently as the binding energy worked through its system. Naruto jumped back, narrowly avoiding the creature's convulsing tail. The chakra network he'd created tightened, forcing the drake's movements to slow until, finally, it collapsed, immobilized but conscious, eyes burning with hatred. Naruto approached cautiously, maintaining the binding jutsu through steady chakra flow. Kneeling beside the creature's massive head, he placed his palm against its scales, sending a gentle pulse of calming energy into its mind. Easy now, he murmured. I'm not going to hurt you. You've just been causing too much trouble in these parts. The drake's vertical pupil dilated, its breathing slowing as Naruto's chakra soothed its primal rage. He hadn't always been able to affect creatures this way. It was a technique born of necessity in this world where communication with monsters was typically deemed impossible. That's it, Naruto continued, his voice steady. The Guild just wants you relocated somewhere you won't be hunting travelers. There's a sanctuary in the northern mountains where you'll have plenty of territory. A series of sharp whistles echoed through the trees. The guild's beast handlers had arrived. Naruto maintained the binding jutsu until they surrounded the drake with specialized restraints and sedatives. Only when the creature was securely contained did he release his technique. The golden energy dissipating into the air. The lead handler, a weather-beaten man with more scars than unmarked skin, approached with undisguised awe. 17 casualties it caused, and you subdued it without a scratch. The rumors don't do you justice, Golden Sage. Naruto shrugged, dismissing the remaining shadow clones. The guild wanted it alive. I delivered. That you did. The handler gestured toward the unconscious drake. The alchemists' coalition will pay handsomely for harvesting rights. Your commission will be substantial. Just make sure it's treated humanely. Naruto replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. It was only protecting its territory. The handler nodded quickly. Of course, of course. The sanctuary Guild lines you established will be followed to the letter. Naruto watched as the team secured the drake to a massive reinforced wagon. The creature would recover during transport, but the sedatives would keep it manageable until reaching the sanctuary. Another successful quest. Though, quest still felt like an odd term to him even after 3 years. As the handlers departed with their cargo, Naruto took a moment to center himself. Allowing Sage Mode to fade, the forest seemed to exhale around him, returning to its natural rhythm now that the predator had been removed. He checked the position of the sun through the canopy. Still early afternoon. Plenty of time to return to the guild and collect his reward before nightfall. Frontier Town waited beyond the forest edge, a sprawling settlement that had grown from a modest outpost to a thriving community in recent years. The town served as a hub for adventurers exploring the untamed wilderness beyond, its wooden walls offering protection from the dangers that lurked in the surrounding territories. Naruto made his way through the western gate, nodding to the guards who recognized his distinctive cloak and whispered among themselves as he passed. His reputation had a way of preceding him, for better or worse. The streets bustled with activity, merchants hawking wares, blacksmiths hammering steel, adventurers bragging about recent exploits. The familiar scent of fresh bread from the bakery mingled with the less pleasant odors of tanneries and stables. Naruto navigated the crowd with practiced ease, returning greetings from those brave enough to address him directly. The Adventurers' Guild occupied the largest building in the town square, its stone facade standing out among the predominantly wooden structures. Twin banners flanked the entrance, displaying the guild's emblem, a sword crossed with a quill, representing both martial prowess and the importance of proper quest documentation. Naruto pushed through the heavy oak doors into the main hall, where dozens of adventurers gathered around notice boards or sat at long tables, comparing notes and sharing meals. Conversations quieted briefly as he entered, many eyes turning to observe the gold-ranked adventurer before resuming their discussions with increased enthusiasm. The reception counter stretched along the far wall, staffed by several guild employees managing the constant flow of quest registrations and completions. At the center stood Luna Silverthread, the guild's head receptionist, her silver-white hair pulled back in a practical bun that emphasized her half-elven features. Luna looked up from her ledger as Naruto approached, her expression professionally neutral despite the unmistakable gleam of interest in her eyes. Adventurer Uzumaki, I take it the forest drake has been dealt with. Quote, captured alive and en route to the northern sanctuary, Naruto confirmed, placing his guild identification tablet on the counter. The handlers should be submitting confirmation within the hour. Luna's quill moved across parchment with practiced precision, recording the quest completion. That's the third mythic tier threat you've resolved this month. The commission board is starting to think we should create a new difficulty classification just for you. A hint of dry humor colored her otherwise businesslike tone. Please don't, Naruto replied with a genuine grimace. I get enough attention as it is. Luna's lips quirked upward briefly before she composed herself. Your reward allocation is being processed. Standard payment for a mythic capture. Plus the Alchemist's Coalition bonus for minimal damage to the specimen. She slid a document across the counter. 4,000 gold coins, transferable to guild credit or material compensation as specified. Naruto glanced at the figure before signing the form. Transfer half to the orphans. Fund and convert 500 to healing supplies for my next expedition. I'll take the rest in coin. Luna raised an eyebrow. That's a substantial donation. They need it more than I do, he said with a shrug. It was a routine they'd repeated dozens of times, yet Luna always seemed faintly surprised by his generosity. As she processed the transaction, Naruto felt eyes on him from across the room. A quick scan revealed a woman watching him from a corner table, crimson hair framing sharp features. Her fingers drumming impatiently against the hilt of an ornate sword. The magical runes etched into her blade marked her as a spellsword, one of the specialized combat mages who channeled arcane energy through enchanted weapons. Who's the redhead? Naruto asked quietly, though he suspected he already knew. Luna followed his gaze before returning to her paperwork. Lyra Flameheart, silver ranked, specializes in fire element combat spells. Recently returned from the southern battlefront with an impressive record. She hesitated before adding, she's been asking about you. Not in a friendly way. Great, Naruto muttered. Another challenger. Most likely. Your methods remain controversial in certain circles. Luna sealed his payment pouch with the guild stamp. Some traditio. Null combat specialists consider your techniques to be cheating. Naruto finished for her. Because I don't kill everything I face. That, and your healing abilities exceed what should be possible without divine blessing. Luna's voice lowered. The temples have been discussing you again. Particularly the Oracle Priestess from the capital. Naruto stilled. The Oracle Priestess, better known as Sword Maiden, rarely involved herself in guild matters. As a former gold-ranked adventurer herself, she understood the importance of autonomy in the field. If she was taking interest in him specifically, something significant was happening. What kind of discussion? He asked, keeping his tone casual despite his sudden alertness. Luna glanced around before leaning slightly forward. Nothing official yet, but rumors suggest she's experiencing difficulties that conventional healing can't address. Your reputation for mending more than physical wounds has reached the highest echelons. Before Naruto could press for details, the guild doors swung open with enough force to silence the hall. A temple envoy entered, his white and gold vestments marking him as a direct representative of the Supreme God's Church. The man's gaze swept the room before settling on Naruto with unmistakable recognition. Well, that was faster than expected, Luna murmured, straightening to her full height. The envoy approached with measured steps, stopping at a respectful distance before offering a formal bow. Adventurer Uzumaki, the Golden Sage, I bring a formal request from Her Holiness, the Oracle Priestess of the Supreme God. Naruto nodded, aware of the sudden attention from every adventurer in the hall. I'm listening. The envoy produced a sealed parchment bearing the Oracle's personal emblem, a sword wrapped in flowing ribbons. Her Holiness requests your presence at the Grand Cathedral in the capital at your earliest convenience. The matter is of significant importance but not immediately urgent. Naruto accepted the parchment, breaking the seal to scan its contents. The letter was brief but clearly written in the Oracle's own hand, the elegant script conveying a request rather than a command despite her station. The capital is 3 days' journey by conventional means, the envoy added. A temple escort can be arranged if that won't be necessary, Naruto interrupted, tucking the letter into his cloak. I can reach the capital by nightfall. The envoy's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's impossible, even with the fastest horses. Trust me, Naruto said with a faint smile. I've got my ways. After the envoy departed, Luna fixed Naruto with a searching look. The Oracle Priestess doesn't request adventurers for trivial matters. Whatever she needs must be extraordinary. Or desperate, Naruto replied quietly, recalling what he knew of the woman once known as Sword Maiden. Her history was legendary among adventurers, a gold-ranked warrior priestess who had helped defeat a demon lord before retiring to religious leadership. The official record spoke only of her triumphs, but whispers told of darker chapters, of capture, torture, and trauma at the hands of goblins before her rise to fame. Luna slid his payment across the counter. Will you accept her request? I'll hear what she has to say. Naruto gathered the coin pouch and started to turn away, then paused. Any updates on those village disappearances near the eastern border? Still under investigation. Goblin activity suspected, but the pattern is unusual. Luna's expression darkened. Entire families vanishing without signs of struggle. The survivors report strange symbols left behind. Naruto frowned. Symbols? What kind? Curved markings, arranged in circles. Similar to magic. Runes but not matching any known arcane language. Luna pulled a sketch from beneath her counter, showing a rough circular pattern with intricate swirls. One of the village elders copied this from a barn wall. Naruto felt a chill of recognition. The design resembled a crude sealing jutsu from his world, specifically, the kind used for chakra extraction. But that should be impossible here. Re-chakra, as he knew it didn't naturally exist. I'd like to investigate this when I return from the capital, he said, memorizing the pattern. I'll register your interest in the quest. Luna tilted her head slightly. Though I'm curious why this particular case catches your attention when you typically pursue higher-tier threats. Naruto carefully kept his expression neutral. Just a hunch. Sometimes the smaller mysteries hide bigger problems. As he turned to leave, he found his path blocked by Lyra Flameheart, who had moved from her table to intercept him. Up close, he could see the TTLE scars that crossed her exposed forearms and the magical essence that seemed to shimmer around her like heat waves. So you're the famous Golden Sage, she said, her accent marking her as from the volcanic southern regions. Strange. You don't look like much. Several nearby adventurers tensed, anticipating conflict. Naruto merely raised an eyebrow, unperturbed by the obvious challenge. Most things worth knowing don't announce themselves with appearances. Pretty words. Lyra's hand remained on her sword hilt. They say you take down mythic beasts without drawing blood. That you heal wounds that should be fatal. Some whisper you're blessed by gods, others say you've made pacts with demons. People say a lot of things, Naruto replied evenly. Most of it wrong. Here's what I say. Lyra leaned closer, her voice dropping to ensure only he could hear. Magic has rules. Divine power has limits. Whatever you're doing breaks both. That makes you either a miracle, her eyes narrowed, or a threat. Naruto met her gaze steadily. And which do you believe? I haven't decided yet. She stepped aside, allowing him to pass. But I'll be watching, Golden Sage. We all will. Naruto nodded, understanding the warning for what it was. In a world built on clearly defined systems of magic and divinity, his chakra abilities represented something unpredictable, something that challenged established beliefs about what was possible. He'd faced similar suspicion in every town and city since his arrival 3 years ago. Outside the guild, Naruto paused to consider his options. The capital lay northwest, a journey that would indeed take 3 days by conventional travel. But as he'd told the envoy, he had other means at his disposal. Finding a secluded alley, Naruto formed the familiar hand signs for a summoning jutsu. A small puff of smoke revealed a toad roughly the size of a large dog, its red-orange skin patterned with black markings. Gamakichi, Naruto greeted with a genuine smile. It's been a while. Only 2 weeks, the toad replied, looking around curiously. Back in Frontier Town, huh? Must be serious if you're calling me here. Unlike most of his abilities, Naruto kept his summoning techniques largely secret. The appearance of talking animals would raise far too many questions in a world where such creatures were typically associated with demon pacts. I need to reach the capital by evening, Naruto explained. The Oracle Priestess has requested a meeting. Gamakichi's eyes widened. The big cathedral lady, what's she want with you? Not sure yet. Possibly related to healing work. Naruto glanced toward the sky. Can you make the jump? The toad scoffed. Please. That's barely a hop for someone of my caliber. But, he fixed Naruto with a knowing look. You'll owe me those spicy dumplings from the market district. Deal. Naruto grinned, placing a hand on Gamakichi's head. Ready when you are. The toad tensed, gathering chakra. Hold tight. Reverse summoning in 3, 2. The world blurred around them, space folding as they vanished from Frontier Town. The sensation of traveling via reverse summoning never became entirely comfortable. a disorienting rush of compressed space and time that left even experienced shinobi momentarily dizzy. They reappeared on a forested hillside overlooking a sprawling city enclosed by massive stone walls. The capital of Melromark stretched before them, its architecture a blend of medieval European influences with fantastical elements unique to this world. At the city's heart rose the Grand Cathedral, its white spires gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Not bad timing, Gamakichi noted, allowing Naruto to dismount. Sun's still up. Want me to wait around? Naruto shook his head. This might take a while. I'll summon you when I'm ready to return. With a casual salute, the toad disappeared in another puff of smoke, leaving Naruto alone on the hillside. He took a moment to adjust his clothing and equipment, ensuring he looked presentable for his meeting with one of the kingdom's most important religious figures. The journey down to the city gates took less than an hour. Unlike Frontier Town's simple wooden palisade, the capital's walls stood 60 feet high, constructed from massive stone blocks enchanted against both physical and magical attacks. Guards in polished armor monitored all who entered, their tabards bearing the kingdom's royal crest alongside the emblem of the supreme god. Naruto presented his guild identification at the checkpoint. The guards examined his gold rank credentials with appropriate respect, though he noticed their eyes lingering on the unusual design of his cloak and the strange markings on his equipment. Purpose of your visit, Adventurer Uzumaki? The senior guard inquired. I've been summoned by the Oracle Priestess, Naruto replied, producing the sealed letter. The guard's demeanor shifted immediately upon recognizing the Oracle's personal seal. Very well, you'll be escorted to the Cathedral District. He signaled to a younger guard. Provide Adventurer Uzumaki with appropriate accompaniment to the Grand Cathedral. The city beyond the gates bustled with activity despite the approaching evening. Unlike the frontier settlements focused primarily on survival and expansion, the capital showcased the kingdom's wealth and cultural sophistication. Paved streets lined with magical lanterns wound between multi-story buildings of stone and timber. Citizens from all walks of life moved through market squares and administrative districts, their clothing indicating social status more clearly than any frontier town would tolerate. Naruto followed his escort through the crowded streets, observing the dynamics of the capital with interest. He visited rarely, preferring the straightforward challenges of the frontier to the political complexities of urban centers. Here, power flowed through subtle channels of influence rather than direct confrontation, a battlefield of whispers and alliances where his combat abilities held less advantage. As they approached the Cathedral District, the architecture grew more imposing. Buildings stood further apart, separated by decorative gardens and ceremonial plazas. The noise of the commercial districts faded, replaced by the distant sound of choral hymns and the soft murmur of prayers. Guards bearing the temple's insignia stood at regular intervals, their ornate armor more ceremonial than practical. And then, rising before them, stood the Grand Cathedral itself, a marvel of engineering and magical construction that had taken over a century to complete. Massive flying buttresses supported walls of gleaming white stone, while stained glass windows depicted scenes from the kingdom's religious history. The central spire reached impossibly high, topped with a golden symbol of the supreme god that caught the last rays of the setting sun. Impressive, isn't it? The escort remarked, noting Naruto's upward gaze. They say the Oracle can commune directly with the supreme god from the sanctum at the spire's peak. Naruto nodded, though his attention had shifted to something less visible. As a sage, he could sense the flow of natural energy, and the cathedral radiated a peculiar pattern, like ripples in still water where something massive lurked just beneath the surface. Divine power, perhaps, or something older that the cathedral had been built to contain. At the main entrance, temple acolytes in white robes received them. Naruto's escort departed with a respectful bow, leaving him in the care of the religious order. The acolytes led him through towering doors into the cathedral's main chamber, where the ceiling soared hundreds of feet overhead, supported by columns carved to resemble ancient trees. The interior space dwarfed even the largest guild halls Naruto had visited, designed to accommodate thousands during important ceremonies. Now, in the quiet hours of early evening, only scattered worshippers knelt in prayer, their whispered devotions echoing softly against stone walls. Her Holiness awaits in the East Reception Chamber, the senior acolyte informed him. Leading the way down a side passage, she was most pleased to hear of your prompt arrival. The east reception chamber proved smaller and more intimate than the main cathedral space, though no less impressive in its decoration. Illuminated manuscripts lined bookshelves of dark wood, while tapestries depicting celestial beings adorned the walls. A circular table of polished marble occupied the center, surrounded by high-backed chairs upholstered in blue velvet. "Please wait here," the acolyte instructed, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Her Holiness will join you shortly." Left alone, Naruto took the opportunity to extend his senses, allowing a touch of natural energy to flow into his system. Not enough for full sage mode, but sufficient to detect any potential threats or hidden observers. The chamber appeared secure, though he noted several enchantments woven into the stone walls, likely privacy wards to prevent eavesdropping. Minutes passed in silence before a hidden door opened at the far end of the chamber. A young woman in simple white robes entered first, her movements careful and deliberate as she arranged items on a side table. Behind her came Aneth, her figure who could only be the oracle priestess herself. Sword Maiden moved with graceful precision despite the blindfold covering her eyes, a symbol of her divine sight that saw beyond physical limitations. Tall and statuesque, she wore ceremonial robes of white and gold that emphasized her position rather than her physical beauty, though the latter remained evident despite the modest attire. Her pale blonde hair fell in gentle waves past her shoulders, partially contained by an ornate headdress that marked her rank. Naruto rose from his chair, offering a respectful bow though he knew she couldn't see it. "Your Holiness, I'm honored by your invitation." "The honor is mine, Golden Sage." Her voice carried a melodic quality that seemed to resonate within the chamber. Few would travel so swiftly in response to a simple request. 3 days compressed into hours, remarked the attendant, arranging a tea service with practiced efficiency. "The rumors of your abilities appear well-founded." Sword Maiden gestured toward the table. "Please, be seated. This is my personal attendant, Sister Celeste Donsong. She enjoys my complete confidence." Celeste offered a polite nod, her expression betraying nothing of her thoughts as she completed her preparations. Unlike the oracle's striking presence, the attendant possessed a more subtle beauty, warm brown hair framing gentle features. Her movements displaying the precision of someone who had dedicated years to service. Once they were seated with tea served, Sword Maiden dismissed the other acolytes with a gentle gesture. When the chamber doors closed, leaving only the three of them, a subtle change came over her posture, a slight relaxation of formal rigidity. "I appreciate your discretion in coming directly," she began, her fingers finding her teacup with unerring accuracy. "What I wish to discuss is not for general knowledge, even within the temple hierarchy." Naruto sipped his tea, noting the rare blend of herbs typically reserved for nobility. "Your letter mentioned healing expertise. I assume this isn't about physical injuries." Perceptive. A faint smile touched Sword Maiden's lips. "No, physical wounds can be addressed by our own healers. I seek something more specialized." Celeste watched Naruto carefully, her protective instincts toward her mistress evident in her attentive posture. "His Holiness has heard accounts of your unique abilities," she explained. "Particularly regarding trauma that lies beyond the reach of conventional healing." Naruto set down his cup. "You're referring to soul healing." The term wasn't one he'd used in his original world, but it had emerged here to describe his techniques for addressing psychological and spiritual damage through chakra manipulation. By blending medical ninjutsu with the natural energy of sage mode, he discovered methods to identify and repair patterns of trauma that manifested in a person's spiritual energy, what this world sometimes called the soul. Sword Maiden inclined her head. "Precisely. Your reputation suggests you've helped those suffering from wounds invisible to normal healers. Nightmares that persist for years. Fears that paralyze beyond reason. Memories that poison the present." Though her voice remained steady, Naruto detected the subtle tension in her hands as they rested on the table. Whatever had prompted this meeting went beyond professional curiosity. "Such healing requires trust," he said carefully. "And time. It's not a simple procedure like setting a broken bone." "I understand." Sword Maiden's blindfold, dead face turned toward him with unsettling accuracy. "Before we discuss specifics, I would know more about your methods. Sister Celeste has compiled accounts from those you've treated, but first-hand explanation would be valuable." Naruto considered how to describe techniques that had no precedent in this world's healing traditions. Everyone carries their experiences as patterns in their spiritual energy, he began. Physical wounds leave physical scars. Traumatic experiences leave similar marks on the spirit, disruptions in the natural flow of energy that can manifest as nightmares, irrational fears, or debilitating memories. And you can see these disruptions? Celeste asked, her professional skepticism evident. In a meditative state, yes. What I call sage mode allows me to perceive natural energy, including the patterns within people. Naruto leaned forward slightly. Once identified, these disruptions can be gradually realigned through focused chakra, my term for the energy I manipulate. Fascinating, Sword Maiden murmured. Our divine healing focuses on physical restoration or blessing to strengthen the spirit. Your approach suggests direct intervention with the spirit itself. It's not without risks, Naruto cautioned. The process requires the person to consciously revisit traumatic memories. I can guide and support, but I can't remove the experience entirely. The goal is integration and healing, not erasure. Sword Maiden nodded slowly. And what of those who cannot face such memories? Those for whom the mere thought of revisiting their trauma induces paralytic terror. The personal nature of her question hung in the air between them. Naruto chose his words carefully, aware of the vulnerability being offered by someone in her position. That's where trust becomes essential. He replied gently. The healing occurs in stages. First establishing safety, then gradually building tolerance. I create a protective framework of supportive energy before approaching the deeper wounds. A moment of silence followed as Sword Maiden seemed to consider his words. Finally, she straightened her posture, resuming a more formal demeanor. The kingdom faces unusual challenges, she stated, shifting to what appeared to be an unrelated topic. Reports of goblin activities have increased dramatically in recent months. Not merely isolated raids, but coordinated actions suggesting unprecedented organization. Naruto recalled Luna's mention of the village disappearances. I've heard rumors. Entire families vanishing without typical signs of goblin attack. Correct. Sword Maiden's voice tightened almost imperceptibly. And symbols left behind. Markings unlike anything in our historical records. I saw a sketch of one such symbol at the guild, Naruto confirmed. It resembled a sealing technique from traditions of studied. He stopped short of mentioning his origin, a topic he discussed with very few in this world. The truth of his arrival a dimensional rift during a battle with Kagaya Otsutsuki would raise far too many questions, and potentially dangerous interest from those who might seek to exploit such knowledge. Then you understand my concern. Sword Maiden continued. If these activities continue unchecked, we risk more than isolated tragedies. Yet the temple's response has been hampered by limitations. Celeste shifted uncomfortably. Her holiness refers to political considerations within the temple hierarchy. Political considerations that prioritize appearances over action, Sword Maiden clarified, a rare edge entering her voice. As oracle, my visions guide many temple decisions. Yet recently, my ability to provide clear guidance has been compromised. Naruto began to understand the situation. Your past experiences with goblins are affecting your visions. The directness of his statement caused both women to still. Celeste's expression tightened with protective concern, while Sword Maiden's hands clasped together more firmly on the table. You are well informed, Sword Maiden finally acknowledged. Yes, though few know the details. My capture and torture at goblin hands occurred before my rise to prominence. The official histories mention only my eventual triumph over adversity. But the nightmares never stopped, Naruto guessed quietly. They've grown worse in recent months, Sweet added when her mistress remained silent. Coinciding with these new goblin activities, Sword Maiden drew a careful breath. I cannot lead the temple's response to this threat while paralyzed by my own memories. Divine healing has proved insufficient. Prayer and meditation offer temporary relief at best. And seeking help from conventional healers would risk your position, Naruto concluded. Understanding the political implications, an oracle showing weakness might face challenges to her authority from ambitious factions within the temple. Precisely. Sword Maiden's head tilted slightly. Which brings me to my request. Would you be willing to attempt your soul healing techniques? To help me overcome these limitations so I might better serve the kingdom during this emerging crisis. The request carried implications beyond personal healing. If these goblin activities connected to the sealing symbols, they might relate to Naruto's own world, potentially threatening both realms. Helping the Oracle could provide access to information and resources unavailable to a lone adventurer, no matter how highly ranked. I'm willing, Naruto agreed. But the process will require regular sessions over time, and complete honesty about the experiences we're addressing. I understand. Sword Maiden inclined her head. Arrangements will be made for your accommodation within the cathedral grounds. Sister Celeste will handle the practical details. The attendant nodded, though her expression suggested lingering reservations. Private quarters can be prepared in the western wing. Remo. Ved from general temple activities but with access to necessary resources. There's one more thing, Naruto added. I'd like permission to investigate these goblin activities myself between our sessions. If the symbols are what I suspect, my expertise may be relevant. Sword Maiden considered this before nodding. A reasonable request. I'll provide authorization for you to act as a temple envoy, giving you access to information and locations that might otherwise be restricted. As they finalized arrangements, Naruto observed the subtle interactions between Sword Maiden and her attendant, protective way Celeste anticipated her mistress's needs, the implicit trust in how the Oracle relied on her support. Their relationship clearly extended beyond formal roles, suggesting a deeper bond formed through shared experiences. When the meeting concluded, Celeste guided Naruto through the cathedral's labyrinthine corridors toward the western wing. Outside the Oracle's presence, the attendant's formal demeanor softened slightly. Her Holiness has never spoken so openly about her condition to an outsider, Celeste remarked as they walked. Your reputation must be extraordinary indeed. Or her situation more desperate than she admitted, Naruto replied. Celeste paused, turning to face him directly. In the softer light of the corridor, he noticed flecks of gold in her brown eyes, a sign of minor divine blessing common among dedicated clerics. You should understand something, she said quietly. The Oracle doesn't merely lead prayers and ceremonies. Her visions guide Kingdom Policy on matters from agriculture to defense. If her condition becomes known, rivals within the temple will move to replace her, individuals whose ambitions far exceed their wisdom. Politics, Naruto sighed. Always complicating things. Indeed. Celeste resumed walking. Which is why your discretion is as important as your healing skills. The Oracle's private struggles must remain private. They will, Naruto assured her. I've never betrayed a patient's confidence. Celeste studied him for a moment longer before nodding, apparently satisfied. Your quarters are through here. Basic amenities are provided, though if you require anything specific for your healing work, please inform me. The room proved comfortable if modest by cathedral standards, a bed, desk, washbasin, and small eating area arranged beneath a window overlooking an inner courtyard. Naruto placed his travel pack on a chair, noting the fresh linens and recently swept floors. Despite the late notice, care had been taken to prepare the space properly. The first healing session is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Celeste informed him from the doorway. After the Oracle's public duties but before midday prayers. I'll come to escort you. I'll be ready, Naruto promised. When she departed, Naruto moved to the window, gazing out at the cathedral's white spires illuminated by moonlight. Far below, Temple Guards patrolled courtyards with practiced precision, their armor gleaming in the torchlight. Beyond the cathedral walls, the capital city stretched toward the horizon, thousands of lives continuing on. Aware of the threats gathering in distant shadows. Leaning against the window frame, Naruto considered what lay ahead. Soul healing was delicate work under normal circumstances. For someone of Sword Maiden's position and power, the complexities multiplied, and if these goblin activities connected to his world as he suspected, the stakes extended far beyond one woman's personal healing. Looks like things are about to get interesting, he murmured to himself, watching as clouds drifted across the night sky. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, not unwelcome, but significant. In this world so different from his own, he'd found new purpose in healing wounds both visible and hidden. Tomorrow would bring the first steps on a path whose destination remained unclear. But uncertainty had never stopped Naruto Uzumaki before, and it wouldn't now, not when both healing and answers awaited. In the quiet of his temporary quarters, he began preparing himself mentally for what lay ahead. Whatever darkness had left its mark on Sword Maiden's soul, he would face it with her, guided by the same determination that had defined his journey as a shinobi and now as the Golden Sage. Outside, the capital slept beneath the watchful spires of the Grand Cathedral, unaware of the golden light that would soon work to heal its oracle's wounded spirit, or the shadows gathering beyond its walls. Bearing symbols from a world that should not touch this one. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Veiled Wounds. Dawn crept through leaded glass windows, painting delicate patterns across stone floors worn smooth by centuries of faithful footsteps. Naruto sat cross-legged in the center of his temporary quarters, hands resting on his knees, breath measured and deliberate. 3 years in this world had altered his meditation practices. The natural energy here flowed differently, carrying unfamiliar currents of divine and arcane power that had initially disrupted his chakra control. He'd adapted, as always. The cathedral's spiritual atmosphere presented unique challenges. Layers of accumulated prayer and ritual had crystallized within the very stone, creating eddies of divine essence that swirled like underwater currents. Naruto let his awareness drift through them, carefully maintaining the balance required for proper meditation without slipping into full sage mode. A soft knock interrupted his concentration. "Enter," he called, opening his eyes as the door swung inward to reveal Sister Celeste. She paused in the doorway, observing his seated position with evident curiosity. "Good morning. I hope I haven't disturbed your prayers." "Not prayers exactly," Naruto replied, unfolding his legs and rising in a single fluid motion. "Just centering myself for the day ahead." C.E. Leshite's gaze lingered on the strange symbols etched into the small scroll he'd placed before him. Unlike the ornate calligraphy of temple scriptures, these markings appeared almost crude, yet contained precise mathematical relationships that would have fascinated the cathedral's scholars had they understood their purpose. "Her Holiness awaits in the reflection chamber," she said, choosing not to inquire about his practices. "Have you broken your fast? I can arrange for something to be brought if needed." "I'm fine," Naruto assured her, tucking the scroll into his belt pouch. "Lead the way." The cathedral's morning rhythms surrounded them as they traversed high-ceilinged corridors. Acolytes moved with purposeful efficiency, preparing for daily ceremonies while senior clerics discussed theological matters in hushed tones. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, transforming ordinary air into rainbow-dappled mist that seemed almost solid enough to touch. Naruto noted the subtle shifts in atmosphere as they moved deeper into the cathedral's private sections. The scent of incense faded, replaced by the clean mineral smell of stone untouched by public ceremony. The air grew cooler, sounds more muted, a physical manifestation of increasing privacy and restricted access. The reflection chamber was originally designed for high meditation, Celeste explained as they descended a curving staircase. Unlike the public prayer halls, it's shielded from external energies, both arcane and divine, creating a neutral space where the mind can achieve perfect clarity. "Sounds ideal for our purposes," Naruto observed. Interference from the cathedral's ambient divine energy would only complicate the delicate work of soul healing. Her Holiness thought the same. Celeste's tone remained professional, though Naruto detected undercurrents of protectiveness. "I should warn you that while she's prepared for this session, revisiting certain memories may trigger reactions." "I understand." Naruto's voice softened. "This work isn't gentle, especially at first. But I won't push faster than she can handle." Celeste studied him with renewed intensity. "You speak from experience." "Both sides of it," he acknowledged. "I've healed many and been healed myself." This admission seemed to satisfy something in Celeste's assessment. Her posture relaxed fractionally as they reached the bottom of the staircase where a simple wooden door awaited, unmarked by the ornate carvings that adorned most cathedral entrances. "The chamber lies beyond," she said, placing her palm against the wood. A brief shimmer of white light spread from her hand, dispelling whatever protective enchantment guarded the entrance. "All remain outside. Some attendants find these sessions distressing to witness." The door opened to reveal a circular room perhaps 30 feet in diameter. Unlike the cathedral's grand spaces designed to inspire awe, the reflection chamber embraced elegant simplicity. Smooth walls of pale stone rose to a domed ceiling where a single circular opening admitted a perfect column of sunlight. The floor featured a mosaic of concentric circles rendered in subtle variations of white and ivory tiles. creating a mandala-like pattern that drew the eye naturally inward. At the room's center knelt Sword Maiden, her formal religious vestments replaced by a simple white robe rem. Innocent of what meditation practitioners might wear. Without her ornate headdress, her pale blonde hair fell freely around her shoulders, softening her appearance. The blindfold remained, though its was simpler, a band of white silk rather than the ceremonial version adorned with religious symbols. The door closed silently behind Naruto as he approached, his footsteps echoing softly in the perfect acoustics of the chamber. Sword Maiden's head turned toward the sound, her posture betraying no surprise at his arrival. Golden Sage, she greeted him, her voice carrying differently in this space, clearer. Less adorned with the formal cadences she'd used during their initial meeting. Thank you for your punctuality. Of course. Naruto moved to stand before her, noting the subtle indications of a restless night, the almost imperceptible tension in her shoulders, the faint pallor beneath her fair complexion. Did you sleep well? A small, rueful smile touched her lips. Diplomacy suggests I should say yes. Healing requires honesty, Naruto countered gently. Even about small things. Then no, Sword Maiden admitted, her fingers briefly tightening where they rested on her knees. The nightmares were persistent. Naruto nodded, though she couldn't see the gesture. May I sit with you? At her assent, he settled cross-legged on the floor facing her, close enough for conversation but maintaining respectful distance. The chamber's perfect acoustics meant they could speak barely above a whisper and still hear each other clearly. Before we begin, he said, I'd like to explain what will happen during this first session. This isn't about confronting your deepest traumas immediately, that comes later, when you're prepared. Today is about establishing connection and baseline. Connection. Her head tilted slightly. My healing technique requires creating a bridge between our energy systems, Naruto explained. I'll need to touch your hands to establish this connection initially. Once formed, I can begin to perceive the patterns of disruption in your spiritual energy. Sword Maiden considered this, her expression thoughtful behind the blindfold. And will this connection allow you to see my memories? Not exactly, Naruto clarified. I'll perceive emotional imprints and energy disruptions. Specific memories remain yours alone unless you choose to share them through words. She nodded slowly. That seems acceptable. What should I do? Just breathe normally and try to remain open. If anything feels uncomfortable or overwhelming, tell me immediately and I'll withdraw. Naruto extended his hands, palms upward. When you're ready, place your hands on mine. Sword Maiden hesitated only briefly before reaching forward. Despite her blindness, our movements showed remarkable spatial awareness as her slender hands found his with unerring accuracy. Her fingers were cool and smooth against his calloused palms, hands that had never known physical labor. Protected by her station and role. Your hands are warm, she observed quietly. Side effect of the energy I channel, Naruto replied. Now, I'll begin establishing the connection. You might feel a mild tingling sensation. Focusing inward, Naruto gathered his chakra, carefully modulating its flow and quality. Unlike combat applications that required raw power, healing work demanded precision and subtlety. He began channeling a gentle current through his palms into Sword Maiden's hands, creating the initial bridge between their energy systems. A soft gasp escaped her lips at the first contact. That's unusual, like sunlight flowing beneath my skin. That's good, Naruto encouraged, maintaining steady concentration. The sensation should remain pleasant. If it becomes uncomfortable at any point, let me know. As the connection strengthened, Naruto gradually expanded his awareness, sending delicate tendrils of chakra through Sword Maiden's energy pathways. Unlike physical healing that targeted specific organs or tissues, soul healing required mapping the entire spiritual network to identify disruptions in the natural flow. What he found made his breath catch. Most trauma victims showed localized disruptions, dark knots or jagged tears in otherwise healthy energy patterns. Sword Maiden's spiritual landscape resembled a magnificent tapestry that had been systematically shredded and roughly rewoven. Beneath a surface layer of apparent functionality lay countless fractures, each meticulously hidden behind walls of rigid control. Your spiritual strength is remarkable, Naruto said truthfully. Few could maintain such functionality with this level of underlying damage. Sword Maiden's lips pressed together. Is that a diplomatic way of saying I'm broken beyond repair? Not at all, Naruto replied firmly. It means you've survived something that would have destroyed most people. The damage is extensive but not irreparable. He continued his careful exploration, noting how the disruptions clustered around specific points that corresponded to both physical and emotional centers. The worst concentration surrounded her eyes, not surprising given her BL-ness, but equally troubling patterns affected areas associated with safety, trust, and intimacy. I need to shift into a deeper healing state now, he informed her. My energy signature will change slightly. Don't be alarmed. Naruto closed his eyes, drawing upon the natural energy of his surroundings while carefully filtering out the cathedral's divine residue. The familiar sensation of sage mode flowed through him, though he maintained only a partial transformation, enough to enhance his perception and healing abilities without the physical manifestations that might startle Sword Maiden. With this enhanced awareness, the true extent of her spiritual injuries became starkly visible. What had appeared as fractures now revealed themselves as profound ruptures in her spiritual foundation. Wounds that had been bleeding vital energy for years while she maintained her duties through sheer force of will. I can see why conventional healing hasn't helped, Naruto said softly. Your injuries exist in layers, with the deepest wounds protected by defensive barriers your mind created for survival. Sword Maiden remained silent, though her pulse had quickened beneath his fingers. I'd like to try something, he continued. Not healing yet, but a temporary stabilization that might offer some immediate relief. Would that be acceptable? She nodded, a barely perceptible movement. Please. Focusing on the most accessible disruptions, Naruto began channeling healing chakra in a specific pattern, not attempting to repair the deep damage, but creating supportive structures around the wounded areas. Like placing a splint on a broken limb, this technique wouldn't heal the underlying injury but could provide stability and reduce immediate pain. As the golden energy flowed between them, Sword Maiden's breathing gradually deepened and slowed. The tension in her shoulders visibly eased, her posture softening from rigid control to something more natural. When Naruto finally completed the temporary stabilization and gently withdrew his hands, she remained still for several moments, as though afraid any movement might shatter the newfound calm. How do you feel? He asked quietly. Her hands rose slowly to touch her face, fingers tracing the edges of her blindfold with wonder. Lighter, she whispered, as though something crushing has been partially lifted. How is this possible? Divine healers have tried for years with minimal effect. Different approach, different results, Naruto explained. Divine healing works through blessing and grace, external forces supporting natural recovery. My techniques work directly with your internal energy, reinforcing your natural patterns rather than imposing external ones. Sword Maiden's head tilted thoughtfully. Like the difference between praying for rain and digging irrigation channels. That's a good analogy, Naruto acknowledged, impressed by her quick understanding. What I've done today is temporary, the equivalent of a bandage rather than true healing. But it should provide some relief while we work on deeper restoration. Even temporary relief is. She paused, searching for words. I've grown so accustomed to carrying this weight that its absence, even partially, feels almost disorienting. Naruto nodded. That's common. Our wounds become part of our identity over time. Healing sometimes requires relearning who we are without them. A faint smile touched her lips. You speak with unusual wisdom for one so young. I'm older than I look, he replied with a hint of humor. An experience ages differently than time. Sword Maiden's expression suggested she understood this sentiment all too well. She straightened slightly, her composed demeanor returning though without the painful rigidity that had marked it before. What happens next in this process? Regular sessions to gradually address deeper wounds, Naruto explained. Today was diagnostic. Future work will target specific areas of trauma, which will require you to consciously engage with difficult memories. I see. Her voice carried a note of apprehension despite her formal tone. And how frequently should these sessions occur? Ideally every 2 to 3 days. Depending on your recovery between sessions. This work requires energy from both of us, pushing too quickly could be counterproductive. Sword Maiden nodded. My schedule can accommodate that arrangement, though some discretion will be required. The temple hierarchy wouldn't understand the nature of this work. Speaking of which, Naruto said, shifting to a related topic. I'd like to learn more about the goblin activities you mentioned. If they're connected to your increasing nightmares, understanding that connection might help our healing work. A.V. Cybele tension returned to Sword Maiden's shoulders at the mention of goblins. What specifically do you wish to know? The patterns of these new attacks, the symbols left behind, any details that differentiate them from typical goblin behavior, Naruto clarified. Information might help both our goals, your healing and addressing the broader threat. She considered his request before nodding slowly. I'll have Sister Celeste provide access to our intelligence reports. She can also arrange communication with frontier outposts if you wish to investigate personally. Thank you. Naruto rose to his feet, noting how the session had taken more of his energy than anticipated. Sword Maiden's spiritual injuries were among the most complex he'd encountered. Healing them would require significant resources from both of them. As if sensing his thoughts, Sword Maiden asked, "Does this process drain you as well?" "To an extent," he admitted. "Though I recover quickly. Then perhaps you should rest before reviewing those reports," she suggested, rising gracefully to her feet. Despite the blindfold, she moved with perfect spatial awareness, her hand finding the small bell at her waist without hesitation. A delicate chime summoned Celeste from outside. The attendant entered immediately, her concerned gaze moving between them before settling on Sword Maiden with evident relief. Even to untrained eyes, the difference in the oracle's demeanor would be noticeable, a subtle unburdening that softened her features and eased the careful precision of her movements. "The session is complete," Sword Maiden informed her. "Please ensure the Golden Sage has access to our intelligence regarding the recent goblin activities, including the unusual symbols." "Of course, Your Holiness." Celeste bowed slightly before turning to Naruto. "Would you prefer to review the materials in your quarters or the archive chamber?" "My quarters would be better," Naruto decided. "I may need to reference my own notes as well." As they prepared to depart, Sword Maiden addressed him once more. "Golden Sage, I have public duties to attend this afternoon, but I would speak with you again this evening if your schedule permits. There are aspects of my condition I would discuss more, privately." The slight emphasis on the final word suggested matters she preferred to keep even from Celeste's ears, an interesting development given the attendant's apparent role as her closest confidant. "Of course," Naruto agreed. "Just send word when you're available." As Celeste led him from the reflection chamber, Naruto noticed her studying him with renewed interest. Once they had ascended the staircase and returned to the main corridor, she spoke in a carefully modulated voice that wouldn't carry to passing acolytes. "Whatever you did in there has affected Her Holiness significantly," she observed. "I haven't seen her move with such ease in months." "It's temporary relief," Naruto cautioned. "The underlying issues remain." "Even so." Celeste's expression softened momentarily before returning to professional composure. "The reports you requested will be delivered to your quarters within the hour." "Is there anything else you require?" "Information about the cathedral's political structure would be helpful," Naruto replied. Understanding the context of Her Holiness's position might provide insights relevant to her healing. Celeste's eyebrows rose slightly, an unusual request for a healer. "Soul wounds don't exist in isolation," Naruto explained. "Daily pressures and responsibilities can aggravate underlying trauma. Knowing what she faces helps me determine how to structure her treatment." This explanation seemed to satisfy Celeste, who nodded thoughtfully. "I'll include appropriate materials with the reports. Though I should warn you that temple politics can be labyrinthine. I've navigated complicated politics before," Naruto assured her with a faint smile. Upon returning to his quarters, Naruto took time to properly center himself after the energy expenditure of the healing session. Sword Maiden's condition presented unique challenges. Her wounds were deeper and more complex than he'd initially anticipated, suggesting systematic trauma rather than a single traumatic incident. The goblin capture mentioned in whispered rumors couldn't explain the entirety of what he'd sensed. Either the experience had been far more prolonged and devastating than public knowledge suggested, or additional traumas had compounded the original injury. Perhaps both. A knock at his door announced the arrival of the promised materials. A young acolyte delivered several leather folios stamped with the temple's seal, bowing respectfully before departing. Naruto spread the documents across his desk, quickly organizing them by apparent relevance. The intelligence reports painted a disturbing picture. Goblin activities had indeed increased dramatically over the past 6 months, with attacks showing unprecedented coordination. Traditional goblin raids targeted isolated farmsteads or small villages, typically focusing on stealing food, supplies, and occasionally abducting women. These new incidents followed different patterns, entire families vanishing without signs of struggle, valuables left untouched, and the mysterious symbols left at each site. Naruto studied the charcoal rubbings of these symbols with growing concern. Though crude in execution, their fundamental structure unmistakably resembled chakra sealing techniques from his world. The specific arrangement suggested some form of extraction or transfer ritual, though the purpose remained unclear without understanding the full array. The political documents proved equally illuminating, though in different ways. The temple hierarchy operated through complex systems of theological jurisdictions, ritual authorities, and divine mandates. As Oracle Priestess, Sword Maiden occupied a unique position, Technica LLY subordinate to the High Patriarch in organizational structure, but possessing independent spiritual authority through her direct communion with the Supreme God. This arrangement created natural tensions. The Oracle's divine visions could contradict the Patriarch's administrative decisions, creating theological dilemmas for the lower ranks. Currently, a delicate balance of power existed between Sword Maiden's visionary authority and the Patriarch's traditional control, a balance that would immediately shift if her competence or divine connection were questioned. Among the materials, Naruto found brief biographies of key temple officials. 3 names appeared repeatedly in contexts suggesting political ambition. Cardinal Domitius, overseer of doctrinal purity, known for rigid interpretation of religious texts and open criticism of modern compromises. Multiple notations indicated his opposition to Sword Maiden's more moderate theological positions. Archbishop Ilara Admenes, traitor of temple finances and distant cousin to the royal family. Her faction advocated closer ties between religious and secular authorities, potentially undermining the Oracle's independent status. Confessor Thaddeus, personal spiritual advisor to the nobility, whose whispered influence extended through networks of guilt and absolution. Though officially supporting Sword Maiden, reports suggested his private opinions differed significantly from his public positions. Any of these figures might benefit from the Oracle's removal or diminishment. All possessed resources to monitor her activities and exploit perceived weaknesses. Naruto leaned back, rubbing his temples as he processed the implications. Sword Maiden wasn't merely fighting personal demons, she navigated treacherous political waters while doing so. Unable to show vulnerability without risking her position and the moderate theological approach it represented. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The small bell near High's door, installed to allow communication without intrusive knocking, signaled a visitor. Naruto rose, stretching muscles stiff from hours of reading, before opening the door to find a temple messenger in formal livery. Golden Sage, the young man bowed crisply. Her Holiness requests your presence in the Eastern Garden at your earliest convenience. The matter is described as personal rather than urgent. Please inform Her Holiness I'll arrive shortly, Naruto replied, noting the carefully neutral expression of the messenger. Palace servants everywhere shared the same professional disinterest in the business of their superiors, or at least the appearance of such. After the messenger departed, Naruto took a few minutes to refresh himself. The afternoon had advanced toward early evening during his research. Golden sunlight slanting through his windows at a steeper angle. He splashed cool water from the basin onto his face, centered his energy with a brief meditation technique, and departed for the Eastern Garden. Unlike the cathedral's formal Western gardens where official ceremonies took place, the Eastern Gardens provided private recreational space for high-ranking temple officials. Stone pathways wound between carefully tended flower beds, ornamental trees, and small meditation alcoves. Water features created gentle background sounds that masked conversation from casual eavesdroppers. Naruto found Sword Maiden seated on a stone bench beside a small koi pond. She had changed from the simple meditation robe to semi-formal religious attire, white and gold vestments that identified her rank while remaining practical for private movement. Her blindfold had returned to the ceremonial version, embroidered with symbols of divine sight. As he approached, Naruto noticed she held something in her hands, a small wooden box carved with unfamiliar symbols. Her fingers traced the patterns absently, suggesting a habitual gesture rather than conscious examination. "Your Holiness," he greeted her, keeping his voice low though they appeared to be alone in this section of the garden. "Golden Sage." Sword Maiden's head turned toward his voice, a small smile touching her lips. "Thank you for coming. Please, join me." She gestured to the space beside her on the bench. As Naruto seated himself, he noted subtle differences in her demeanor from their morning session. Though the temporary healing continued to provide some relief, new tension had entered her posture. Something had occurred during her afternoon duties. "How are you feeling after this morning's session?" he asked, beginning with the most natural question. "Better than expected," she admitted. "The lightness has persisted, though it's beginning to fade somewhat. More importantly, I was able to complete my public duties without the usual strain." "That's encouraging," Naruto observed. "Your system is responding well to the treatment approach." Sword Maiden nodded, her fingers still moving across the carved box. "I've spent years consulting the finest healers in the kingdom. None have provided even temporary relief comparable to what you achieved in a single session. Different methods, different results." Naruto repeated his earlier explanation. "Divine healing works wonderfully for physical injuries but follows different principles than the energy work I practice." "Indeed." She turned her blindfolded face toward him more directly. "Which brings me to why I asked you here. During this afternoon's prayer ceremony, I experienced something unusual." Naruto waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts. "As Oracle, my connection to the Supreme God manifests through visions, impressions of possible futures or hidden truths relevant to current circumstances. These visions have grown increasingly fragmented in recent months, corrupted by intrusive memories." Her voice remained steady despite the difficult admission. "The trauma interfering with your divine connection," Naruto surmised. "Precisely. Yet today, during the ceremony, I experienced moments of unusual clarity. Brief but significant." Her hand stilled on the carved box. "In one such moment, I perceived something about you that I believe we should discuss privately." Naruto tensed slightly. "What did you see?" "Not your past, if that concerns you," Sword Maiden assured him. "Divine sight rarely reveals personal histories. Rather, I perceived something about your energy. Its fundamental nature differs from anything in our theological understanding." This observation touched dangerously close to the truth of Naruto's origins. Few in this world knew he came from another reality entirely, his chakra system fundamentally different from the magical or divine energies native to this realm. "Different how?" he asked carefully. "Your energy contains patterns I've only seen once before." Sword Maiden lifted the carved box. "In these symbols." Naruto's breath caught as she opened the box to reveal a small stone tablet covered in unmistakable script, characters from his world, arranged in a formal sealing pattern. The style suggested origins at least as old as the era of the Sage of Six Paths. "Where did you get this?" he asked, unable to completely mask his surprise. "It was discovered beneath the cathedral foundations during renovations nearly 50 years ago," Sword Maiden explained. The excavation uncovered a chamber predating the cathedral itself, containing several artifacts including this tablet. Most were sent to the capital archives, but this one remained here due to its alleged connection to the oracle's role. She traced the characters with her fingertip. None could decipher these markings, but tradition holds that they describe the bridge between worlds that allows the oracle to perceive divine truths. I've kept it as a personal meditation focus, though its meaning remained obscure until today. And now, Naruto prompted gently, "Now I perceive similarities in these patterns and your healing energy," Sword Maiden stated simply. "Which suggests either divine confirmation of your methods, or something far more significant that our theology has misinterpreted for centuries." The implication hung between them. Her divine sight had detected the foreign nature of his chakra and its connection to artifacts that predated this world's current religious understanding. This created both opportunity and danger. "What do you believe?" Naruto asked, carefully weighing his options. Complete honesty might overwhelm her already fragile system, yet deception old undermine the trust essential for healing. Sword Maiden considered the question, her expression thoughtful behind the ceremonial blindfold. "I believe there are mysteries beyond our current understanding," she finally replied. "And that your presence here, with abilities that match ancient artifacts, cannot be mere coincidence." Whether sent by the Supreme God or arriving through means beyond our comprehension. Your purpose appears aligned with healing and protection. She turned the tablet in her hands. These symbols have been mistranslated and misunderstood. They don't describe the Oracle's divine connection. They're instructions for something else entirely. You're right, Naruto confirmed, deciding that partial truth served better than evasion. They describe a technique for receiving and manipulating energy in ways different from this world's magic or divine power. The method I use for healing. This wasn't the complete truth. The tablet actually detailed an interdimensional null summoning technique, but it connected to the healing applications he developed since arriving in this world. Then my vision was accurate, Sword Maiden said with evident satisfaction. The clarity I experienced today allowed me to perceive this connection where years of study had failed. Your divine sight seems to be responding to the healing work, Naruto observed. As the disruptions in your energy diminish, your natural abilities strengthen, which makes continuing these sessions even more important. Sword Maiden carefully returned the tablet to its box. Both for my personal well-being and my duties as Oracle. Naruto nodded, though a question remained. Why discuss this privately? Wouldn't confirmation of divine insight strengthen your position? A sad smile touched Sword Maiden's lips. Politics is rarely so straightforward. Claiming sudden new revelations about ancient artifacts would invite scrutiny I cannot currently withstand. Questions would arise about why my divine sight failed previously yet functions now. Investigations would follow, exposing the very vulnerabilities I must keep hidden. The healing must remain secret to protect your position, Naruto concluded. Precisely. Sword Maiden turned toward the koi pond, though she couldn't see the colorful fish swimming beneath the surface. Perception of weakness can be more dangerous than weakness itself, particularly in positions of spiritual authority. They sat in comfortable silence for several moments, the gentle sounds of flowing water and distant birdsong filling the space between them. Despite the weighty topics they'd discussed, Naruto noticed Sword Maiden's posture had relaxed slightly in his presence, a promising sign for their ongoing work together. I reviewed the reports on Goblin activities, he said eventually, shifting to their other shared concern. The symbols are definitely connected to techniques I recognize, though their specific application remains unclear without seeing the complete arrays. Do you believe these goblins could be using such techniques intentionally? Sword Maiden asked, a note of tension entering her voice at the mere suggestion of goblin intelligence. Unlikely, Naruto replied honestly. The execution is too crude, the arrangements inconsistent. More likely they're being directed by someone with incomplete knowledge, mimicking patterns they've seen without understanding the underlying principles. That presents its own concerns, Sword Maiden observed. If someone is controlling goblin tribes with sufficient authority to implement these symbols, we face a coordinated threat rather than isolated incidents. Exactly. Naruto leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I'd like to investigate one of these sites personally. Seeing the complete arrangement might reveal the intended purpose. Sword Maiden nodded. I anticipated this request. Arrangements have been made for you to accompany a temple investigation team. Departing tomorrow for Riverton, a village where 3 families disappeared 5 days ago. Sister Celeste will provide the details. Thank you. Naruto hesitated before adding, this may delay our next healing session by a day or 2. Understandable. Sword Maiden's hands folded in her lap, her expression composed though Naruto detected subtle tension in the movement. The temporary relief they provided should sustain me until your return. Their conversation might have continued, but approaching footsteps signaled an end to their privacy. A temple official in ornate vestments appeared on the garden path, accompanied by 2 attendants carrying ceremonial implements. Your Holiness, the official bowed deeply. Forgive the interruption, but the evening blessing ceremony awaits your presence. Of course, Cardinal Domitius. Sword Maiden rose gracefully, her manner shifting seamlessly from private individual to public religious figure. I was just concluding my consultation with the Golden Sage regarding regional security matters. Cardinal Domitius, the same figure identified in the political documents as a potential rival, studied Naruto with barely concealed suspicion. The adventurer remains in residence, then. I had understood his business with the temple to be concluded today. The situation with outlying communities requires extended consultation, Sword Maiden replied smoothly. The Golden Sage's expertise with unusual threats serves the temple's protective mission. Indeed, the cardinal's tone suggested skepticism despite his formal acknowledgement. Then, we shall continue to extend our hospitality as befits a gold-ranked adventurer. Though I wonder if the guild might not miss such a valuable asset during his extended consultation. The implied criticism hung in the air for a moment before Sword Maiden addressed it directly. The guild master and I have already communicated regarding this arrangement. The protection of faithful communities outweighs other considerations at present. Quote, effectively outmaneuvered, Cardinal Domitius could only incline his head in grudging acquiescence. As your holiness determines, the ceremony awaits whenever you are prepared. I shall proceed immediately. Sword Maiden turned toward Naruto, her formal tone unchanged though he detected a note of genuine warmth beneath it. We shall continue our discussion upon your return from Riverton. Golden Sage, may your journey prove illuminating. With perfect dignity, she followed the cardinal and his attendants toward the cathedral, leaving Naruto alone beside the koi pond. The brief interaction had demonstrated both the political pressures surrounding Sword Maiden and her skill in navigating them despite her current vulnerabilities. As twilight deepened in the eastern garden, Naruto remained seated, considering the complex situation developing around him. The connections between his world and this one appeared stronger than he'd previously believed. The ancient tablet suggested contact between realms had occurred long before his own accidental arrival. If the goblin activities involved crude attempts at chakra manipulation, someone with knowledge of his world's techniques might be operating behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Sword Maiden's condition presented both challenge and opportunity. Healing her spiritual wounds would require addressing profound trauma while navigating political complications that could threaten her position if mishandled. Yet her divine sight had already begun responding to his treatment, potentially offering insight into the broader mystery of the interdimensional connections. The koi swam lazy circles in the darkening pond, oblivious to the weighty matters contemplated above them. Naruto watched their movements, allowing his thoughts to settle into clearer patterns. Tomorrow would bring the investigation at Riverton, potentially revealing more about the symbols and their purpose. For tonight, he needed rest and preparation. Rising from the bench, Naruto made his way back toward his quarters, passing temple attendants lighting evening lanterns along the garden paths. The cathedral loomed against the twilight sky, its white spires catching the last rays of sunset while shadows gathered at its base. Somewhere within those massive walls, Sword Maiden would be performing her ceremonial duties, present in a facade of divine certainty while carrying wounds invisible to her followers. Healing such wounds would require more than technical skill, it demanded patience, discretion, and deeper understanding of the woman behind the oracle's mantle. As Naruto retired to his room to prepare for tomorrow's journey, he reflected that true healing often began with seeing the person beneath the pain, something he intended to accomplish regardless of the political complexities surrounding them. Morning arrived with a persistent, fine mist that shrouded the cathedral grounds in ghostly white. Naruto joined the temple investigation team at the eastern gates where horses and supplies had been prepared for the journey to Riverton. The group consisted of 6 individuals, 3 temple guards in practical armor bearing religious symbols, a clerk responsible for documenting findings, a priest specialized in detecting malevolent influences, and Naruto himself. To his surprise, Sister Celeste approached as they completed their preparations. She wore a practical traveling cloak over her religious garments, sturdy boots replacing the soft slippers usually worn within the cathedral. Sister Celeste, the lead guard acknowledged with evident confusion. We weren't informed you would be joining the investigation. Her Holiness believes my observational skills may prove useful, Celeste replied smoothly, accepting the reins of a 7th horse from a stable hand. The unusual nature of these incidents warrants thorough documentation from multiple perspectives. The guard appeared momentarily conflicted before nodding acceptance. Of course, we welcome your insight. As the team mounted their horses and proceeded through the city gates, Naruto maneuvered his mount alongside Celeste's. Though competent, she clearly rode less frequently than the guards, her posture slightly too rigid in the saddle. Observational skills, Naruto inquired quietly once they had passed beyond earshot of the others. Celeste's lips quirked in a brief, unexpected smile. Her Holiness suggested I might learn something valuable by watching your investigative methods. She believes understanding your approach could prove relevant to her treatment. The diplomatic phrasing suggested Sword Maiden had arranged Celeste's presence for multiple purposes: official observation, certainly, but also to establish greater trust between her attendant and her healer. A prudent decision given the intimate nature of the work they would continue upon his return. Have you visited sites like this before? Naruto asked as their party followed the eastern road through cultivated farmlands. Twice, Celeste admitted, though neither involved the unusual elements reported at Riverton. Conventional goblin raids leave distinct evidence: destruction, partial consumption of foodstuffs, crude messages in blood. These recent incidents show none of those patterns, which suggests either deliberate misdirection or an entirely different motive. Naruto observed. Celeste nodded, her expression thoughtful. The symbols particularly concern Her Holiness. She believes they may connect to historical events not fully documented in temple records. This carefully worded statement likely referenced their conversation about the ancient tablet, Sword Maiden sharing her concerns through Celeste without revealing confidential details. Naruto appreciated the discretion while recognizing the implicit trust being extended. The journey to Riverton took most of the day, the terrain gradually shifting from managed farmlands to wilder countryside where settlements grew smaller and more isolated. By late afternoon, they approached their destination, a modest farming community of perhaps 30 households arranged around a central square with a small shrine to the supreme god. Even from a distance, the unnatural silence was apparent. No smoke rose from chimneys, no livestock moved in the fields, no children played in the vacant spaces between buildings. The village stood intact but utterly abandoned, frozen in the midst of ordinary life as though its inhabitants had simply evaporated. The investigation team established a perimeter at the village entrance, the priest performing rituals to detect malevolent presences before declaring the site spiritually vacant. No lingering evil, he reported. But a strange emptiness persists where divine blessing should remain. Under the lead guard's direction, they separated into pairs to examine different sections of the village. Naruto and Celeste took responsibility for the northern quadrant, where two of the missing families had resided. As they approached the first farmhouse, Naruto extended his senses, allowing a touch of natural energy to flow through his system. Not enough for visible sage mode, but sufficient to detect energy residues that might escape normal perception. The farmhouse door stood unlocked, swinging open at Celeste's touch to reveal an interior in perfect order. The main room contained a table set for 5 people, meals partially consumed, chairs pushed back as though the family had risen simultaneously in the midst of dinner. A pot still hung over the cold hearth, its contents desiccated after days without attention. No signs of struggle, Celeste observed, moving carefully through the space. No blood, no overturned furniture. Yet an entire family wouldn't abandon a meal without cause. Naruto nodded, his attention drawn to faint energy traces that ordinary senses couldn't detect. Something was here, he murmured. Not goblins, at least not alone. There's residual energy unlike goblin signatures. You can detect such things? Celeste asked, watching him with renewed interest. Part of my technique, Naruto explained. Following the faint trail toward the back of the house. Living beings leave energy impressions, especially when experiencing strong emotions. Fear, panic, pain, they create distinct patterns. And what patterns do you detect here? Naruto frowned, concentrating on the subtle residues. Confusion primarily, not terror, which would be expected with a goblin attack. More like disorientation, as if they didn't understand what was happening to them. The energy trail led to the farmhouse's rear door, which opened onto a small vegetable garden. At the garden's edge, barely visible in the soil, Naruto found what he was seeking, a crude circle of symbols pressed into the earth, partially obscured by recent rainfall but still discernible to trained eyes. Here, he indicated, kneeling beside the marking. This is what we're looking for. Celeste joined him, studying the pattern with evident confusion. It resembles no runic system I'm familiar with. Neither arcane nor divine in origin. It's not from your world's magical traditions, Naruto confirmed, carefully not specifying the actual source. The arrangement suggests a containment and transportation function, design. D to move subjects from one location to another. Like a teleportation circle? Celeste asked, referencing a rare and expensive magical technique sometimes used by wealthy merchants or nobility. Similar principle but cruder implementation, Naruto replied, tracing the pattern without touching it. This wouldn't transport physical bodies directly. It's designed for energy extraction. The implications darkened his expression. If someone was attempting to extract chakra or spiritual energy from victims in this world, the consequences could be devastating, both for the individuals targeted and potentially for the broader stability between realms. We should check the other affected household, he suggested, rising from his examination of the symbol. If a matching circle exists there, it confirms a systematic approach rather than isolated experimentation. The second farmhouse revealed a nearly identical scenario, signs of interrupted daily life, residual energy patterns suggesting confusion rather than terror. And another symbol circle hidden behind the dwelling. This circle appeared more precisely executed, suggesting refinement of technique between applications. As daylight began to fade, the investigation team regrouped in the village square to share findings. The other pairs reported similar discoveries: abandoned meals, unlocked doors, personal belongings left behind, and symbol circles near each affected household. 17 villagers had vanished without violence or apparent resistance. The priest believes these symbols represent some form of heretical ritual. The lead guard informed them as they assembled around a hastily established camp. Though he cannot identify the specific tradition. Has anyone checked for tracks leading from the village? Naruto asked. If physical bodies were transported after the ritual, some evidence of movement should remain. The guards exchanged glances before one responded. Limited tracks were found leading northeast, toward the mistwood. Goblin footprints primarily, though fewer than would be expected for moving 17 captives. The mistwood, Celeste repeated with evident concern. That forest has a troubled history. Ancient ruins lie within its boundaries, remnants of civilizations predating the kingdom's establishment. Ruins that might contain more of these symbols, Naruto suggested, connecting the possibilities. If someone is researching forgotten techniques, such locations would provide ideal reference materials. As the investigation team established watches for the night, Naruto took Celeste aside. Speaking quietly to avoid being overheard. I need to follow those tracks while they're still relatively fresh. Waiting until morning with the full team will only allow more time for evidence to disappear. Celeste studied him with shrewd assessment. You believe there's more urgency than you've expressed to the others. These symbols are dangerous in ways the temple wouldn't understand, Naruto confirmed. If someone is experimenting with interdimensional techniques, the consequences could extend far beyond missing villagers. After a moment's consideration, Celeste nodded. I'll inform the team leader you're conducting a perimeter check and may not return until morning. But, her expression grew serious, I'm coming with you. Naruto began to object, but Celeste raised a hand to forestall his protest. Her Holiness instructed me to observe your methods directly. I cannot fulfill that duty if left behind with the regular investigation team. The determination in her eyes suggested argument would prove futile. Moreover, having a temple representative witness whatever they discovered might prove valuable when presenting findings to Sword Maiden. Very well, Naruto conceded. But stay close and follow my instructions exactly. Where we're going may be more dangerous than a typical investigation. With the team leader informed of their extended perimeter check, Naruto and Celeste slipped away from the village as twilight deepened into true darkness. Following the northeastern tracks required Naruto to employ enhanced senses, the subtle depressions and broken vegetation invisible to normal sight in the growing darkness. How can you track in these conditions? Celeste asked quietly as they moved through fields toward the distant treeline of the mistwood. Another application of the energy perception I mentioned, Naruto explained, maintaining focus on the faint trail. Living things disturb natural energy patterns when they pass. Recent disturbances leave clearer signatures. The tracks led directly toward the forest boundary, becoming more distinct as they approached. Boot prints mingled with the clawed footprints of goblins, confirmati. On that human direction guided the creatures rather than their own limited intelligence. As they reached the forest edge, Naruto paused, extending his senses more fully. The mistwood radiated a peculiar IAR energy signature, ancient and layered, with currents that seemed to flow contrary to the natural patterns he typically encountered. Whatever history this place contained, it had left permanent marks on the spiritual landscape. We should proceed carefully from here, he advised Celeste. This forest contains energy patterns unlike anything I've encountered in this world before. Celeste nodded, her hand moving to a slender wand concealed within her robes, a focus for divine protection magic, Naruto presumed. Despite her role as an attendant, she clearly possessed some practical training for dangerous situations. They followed the tracks deeper into the forest, moving slowly as darkness enveloped them completely. Naruto considered creating a small light source but decided against it, to preserve their night vision and avoid announcing their presence to potential hostiles. The trail wound between ancient trees whose massive trunks suggested centuries of undisturbed growth, the canopies blocking even starlight from reaching the forest floor. After nearly an hour of careful progress, a faint glow appeared ahead, artificial light reflecting against mist that seemed to perpetually hover among the trees. Naruto gestured for Celeste to remain still as he extended his senses toward the source. Approximately 200 yards ahead, a clearing contained what appeared to be ruins, crumbling stone structures partially reclaimed by vegetation. Within these ruins, movement suggested multiple beings engaged in some form of activity. The energy signatures confirmed both goblin presences and at least 2 humans directing their efforts. There's an encampment ahead, Naruto whispered, returning to Celeste's side. Goblins and human handlers. They appear to be excavating something from the ruins. The missing villagers? Celeste asked, her voice barely audible. Naruto shook his head. I don't sense that many human signatures. Either the villagers are elsewhere, or he left the darker possibility unspoken. We should observe before taking action, Celeste suggested. Learning their purpose might reveal where the missing people have been taken. Naruto nodded agreement. We'll circle around to approach from downwind. Stay close and match my movements exactly. They proceeded with painstaking care, using the massive trees as cover while working their way to a position overlooking the clearing. From their new vantage point, the operation below became visible in disturbing detail. A dozen goblins labored under the direction of 2 robed figures, excavating what appeared to be an ancient stone doorway embedded in a hillside. The architecture resembled nothing native to this world, angular geometries and strange proportions that seemed to challenge normal spatial relationships. Most concerning, the entirety of the doorway was covered in symbols identical to those found in the village, though far more complex and complete in their arrangement. Uncovering something sealed long ago, Naruto murmured, recognition dawning as he studied the patterns. The doorway bore unmistakable characteristics of an interdimensional portal, similar to Tekken. IQs the Otsutsuki clan had used to travel between worlds, though cruder in execution. One of the robed figures approached the partially excavated doorway, holding aloft a crystal container that glowed with pale blue light. Within the container, swirling energy pulsed and shifted, energy that Naruto recognized with chilling certainty as extracted human chakra, likely harvested from the missing villagers. What is that? Celeste whispered, her expression reflecting appropriate horror at the unnatural sight. Spiritual energy extracted from living beings, Naruto replied grimly. They're using it to power whatever lies behind that doorway. The robed figure placed the crystal container into a recessed space in the center of the doorway. Immediately, the symbols carved into the stone began to glow with the same pale blue light. Energy flowing through the patterns like liquid through channels. A low humming filled the clearing, causing the goblins to shrink back in evident fear. We need to stop this, Naruto decided. Preparing to move. Whatever they're activating, it can't be allowed to complete. Before they could act, a third figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, taller than the others. Clad in more elaborate robes decorated with symbols from both this world and Naruto's. The newcomer's face remained hidden beneath a deep hood, but their commanding presence immediately altered the dynamics below. The original 2 figures bowed deeply as the third approached the doorway, gesturing with elaborate movements that sent additional energy flowing into the activated symbols. The humming intensified, stone grinding against stone as the ancient door began to shift, revealing darkness beyond that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the torchlight. Now, Naruto whispered urgently to Celeste. Stay hidden unless absolutely necessary. I'll handle this. Without waiting for her response, Naruto formed a familiar hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Mu. Multiple copies of himself materialized around the clearing, each moving with practiced coordination to surround the operation below. The original Naruto remained beside Celeste, ready to protect her if the situation escalated beyond his clone's capacity. The sudden appearance of identical figures from multiple directions threw the encampment into chaos. Goblins scattered with panicked shrieks while the robed humans turned in alarm. One raising hands that crackled with arcane energy. Step away from the doorway, Naruto's clones demanded in unison, their synchronous voices creating an unsettling effect in the mist-filled clearing. Whatever you're attempting ends now. The third figure, clearly the leader, showed no sign of fear or surprise. Instead, a cold laugh echoed from beneath the concealing hood. The Golden Sage, a feminine voice observed with evident amusement. Your interference was anticipated, if not quite so soon. With a casual gesture, the leader sent a pulse of energy toward the doorway, accelerating whatever process had begun. The grinding of stone intensified as the ancient portal opened wider, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness beyond. Naruto's clones moved to intercept, but the other robed figures had recovered from their initial surprise. One hurled orbs of crackling energy that dispersed two clones on impact, while the other made gestures that caused the earth beneath several more to erupt in grasping tendrils of animated soil. The leader maintained focus on the doorway, channeling energy into the symbols as the portal continued to widen. From the darkness beyond, something began to emerge, a shadowy appendage that resembled neither arm nor tentacle but some unsettling combination of both, reaching toward the crystal container of harvested energy. Understanding the immediate danger, Naruto acted decisively. Channeling chakra into his palm, he formed a Rasengan infused with wind nature, the Rasenshuriken, and directed his remaining clones to create an opening toward the portal. Now, he commanded, launching forward as his clones engaged the robed figures, creating the diversion he needed. The leader sensed his approach, turning with surprising speed to face the attack. As the hood fell back, Naruto caught a glimpse of the face beneath, female, with features that might once have been beautiful but now appeared partially transformed. One eye human while the other displayed the distinctive pattern of a Byakugan from his world. Too late, Sage, she hissed, making no attempt to dodge his attack. Instead, she slammed her palm against the doorway's central symbol, sending a final surge of power through the entire array. Naruto's Rasenshuriken struck the space between the woman and the portal, its rotating blades of wind infuse Ed chakra tearing through the air with destructive force. The leader was thrown sideways by the impact, her body crashing against the stone ruins with bone-breaking force. But the energy she had channeled completed its purpose. The doorway fully opened, the darkness beyond coalescing into a tangible presence that began to pour forth like liquid shadow. Celeste, run! Naruto shouted, abandoning stealth as the situation deteriorated. Whatever emerged from that portal posed a greater threat than exposure of their presence. To her credit, Celeste didn't flee. Instead, she rushed forward into the clearing, drawing her wand in a sweeping motion that sent arcs of golden light toward the emerging shadow. Where the divine energy struck, the darkness hissed and recoiled, momentarily slowing its advance. It responds to divine energy, she called to Naruto, continuing to channel golden light through her focus. Understanding immediately, Naruto adjusted his approach. Pure chakra attacks might prove ineffective against this interdimensional entity, but this world's divine energy clearly affected it. He needed to adapt his techniques accordingly. Creating another set of shadow clones, Naruto began gathering natural energy while his duplicates protected both him and Celeste from the remaining robed figures and disorganized goblins. As Sage Mode activated, he felt the distinctive energy of this world's divine power flowing through the natural patterns around them, strongest near Celeste as she continued channeling through her wand. Keep it contained, he instructed her, completing his transformation. With Sage Mode active, Naruto could perceive the entity's true nature, a parasitic consciousness that fed on spiritual energy, drawn by the harvested chakra from the villagers. Forming a modified Rasengan, Naruto deliberately incorporated strands of the divine energy Celeste was channeling, creating a hybrid technique unique to this specific threat. The sphere in his palm pulsed. With both the golden light of divine power and the blue-green swirl of his chakra, the competing energies stabilizing into a new form through his Sage Mode's balancing influence. Divine Sage Art. Purifying Rasengan. He named the technique as it formed, acknowledging both the inspiration and the adaptation. With his clones providing coverage, Naruto charged directly toward the partially manifested entity. The hybrid Rasengan leading his attack. The shadow entity sensed the approaching threat, tendrils of darkness lashing outward to intercept him. Where they touched, Naruto felt a chilling sensation that went beyond physical cold. The creature attempted to feed on his chakra directly. But Sage Mode provided natural protection against such extraction. Pushing through the grasping darkness, Naruto thrust the purifying Rasengan into the entity's core where it connected to the interdimensional doorway. The combined energies detonated on impact, sending waves of purifying force radiating outward. The entity's shriek transcended normal sound, manifesting as psychic pain that caused every being in the clearing to flinch. The darkness began to fragment, pieces of shadow dissipating like smoke in strong wind as the purifying energy disrupted its cohesion. With a final, silent implosion, the entity collapsed back through the doorway, the portal itself beginning to seal as the power sustaining it faltered. Naruto turned his attention to the leader, who had somehow regained her footing despite injuries that should have been incapacitating. Her partially transformed face contorted with rage as she witnessed her summoning's failure. "This changes nothing," she spat, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. "The barriers between worlds grow thinner by the day. What one key cannot open, another will." Before Naruto could reach her, she made a complex gesture with both hands, creating a swirling vortex of energy unlike either chakra or this world's magic, a hybrid technique that enveloped her form. In seconds, she had vanished, the teleportation technique leaving nothing but dissipating energy in her wake. The remaining robed figures attempted to flee, but Naruto's clones intercepted them easily. Without their leader's power or the goblin support that had scattered into the forest, they had no chance against multiple gold-ranked opponents. Within moments, both were subdued and restrained. As the immediate threat subsided, Naruto released his remaining clones and approached Celeste, who had lowered her wand but remained alert for further danger. Her expression reflected both shock at what they had witnessed and determination to understand its significance. "What was that thing?" she asked, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "An interdimensional parasite," Naruto explained, knowing partial truth served better than complete evasion. "Drawn by the specific energy they extracted from the villagers. It feeds on spiritual essence, consuming its victims entirely if given the opportunity." Celeste's gaze moved to the crystal container still embedded in the doorway, its glow diminished but not extinguished. "Then the missing villagers may still be alive," Naruto said, offering hope despite his doubts. "If they only extracted portions of their spiritual energy rather than completely draining them. We need to question the prisoners." The interrogation proved frustratingly limited. The captured figures revealed themselves as mere acolytes of an organization they called the Convergence, dedicated to reuniting Sunder Ed realities, under the leadership of the woman they referred to only as the Bridge. They knew little of the overall plan beyond their specific role in activating dormant portals using harvested spiritual energy. The villagers were taken to the northern facility, one finally admitted after persistent questioning, for processing and contribution to the Great Convergence. "Processing?" Celeste demanded, her normally gentle demeanor hardened by what they had witnessed. "Preparation for ascension," the acolyte replied with disturbing reverence. "Their essence serves the merging of worlds. Their bodies host the coming transformation." This partial confession confirmed Naruto's worst fears. The organization appeared to be attempting some form of forced chakra development in this world's inhabitants. Processing, that likely killed most subjects while preparing survivors for possession by entities from beyond the dimensional barriers. With dawn approaching, they secured the prisoners and the crystal container for transport back to the village where the full investigation team waited. The ancient doorway had resealed itself after the entity's retreat, the symbols fading to dormant status that would require another activation ritual to awaken. As they departed the clearing, Naruto cast a final glance at the ruins. The connection to his world was undeniable, the Byakugan eye of the leader. The chakra manipulation techniques, the interdimensional doorway with symbols from his reality. Whatever convergence this cult sought, it threatened both worlds with consequences beyond their comprehension. We need to return to the cathedral immediately, he told Celeste as they rejoined the investigation team. The Oracle must be informed of what we've discovered. Celeste nodded, her expression grave. Her Holiness's visions may provide context we lack. If these events connect to ancient histories predating our current theological understanding. She left the implication unspoken, but Naruto understood. Sword Maiden's divine sight, especially as it strengthened through their healing work, might reveal critical information about the interdimensional threat they now faced. The personal healing and the broader danger had become inextricably linked. Progress in one area might prove essential to addressing the other. As they prepared for the return journey, Naruto contemplated the complexity of the situation. What had begun as a request to heal one woman's traumatic wounds had expanded into a potential multidimensional crisis. Yet the connection felt appropriate. Somehow, Sword Maiden's personal healing paralleling the healing of the breach between worlds. Whatever lay ahead, their paths had become intertwined by forces beyond simple coincidence. As healer and patient, as allies against a common threat, as individuals drawn together by circumstances neither could have anticipated, Naruto and Sword Maiden now shared a journey whose destination remained uncertain, but whose importance continued to grow with each revelation. The morning sun rose over the abandoned village of Riverton, illuminating empty homes that stood as silent testimony to the human cost already accumulating. By midday, they would be on the road back to the capital, carrying knowledge that would inevitably transform their understanding of both the immediate crisis and the deeper connections between realities that had brought Naruto to this world in the first place. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Threads of Trust. Rain pounded against the cathedral windows, transforming the morning GHT into a shifting kaleidoscope of grays and silvers. Naruto stood before the assembled temple council, water still dripping from his travel cloak despite the hours passed since their return to the capital. The journey back from Riverton had been arduous, muddy roads and relentless downpours slowing their progress to a miserable crawl. Yet the physical discomfort paled against the weight of what they'd discovered. An interdimensional entity, Cardinal Domitius repeated, skepticism evident in his tone. Summoned through ancient doorways by cultists harvesting human essence. This sounds more like Adventurer's Tavern tales than a serious intelligence report. The council chamber epitomized the temple's approach to power, ostensibly humble yet unmistakably imposing. 12 high-backed chairs, arranged in a perfect semicircle, faced a simple stone dais where petitioners stood exposed to scrutiny. No shadows to hide within, no place to retreat. By design, those who addressed the council did so from a position of vulnerability. Naruto remained unmoved by the theatrical intimidation. The evidence speaks for itself, Your Eminence. 17 villagers missing. Symbols matching no known magical tradition. 2 captured cultists whose testimony confirms an organization called the Convergence, operating throughout the region. Testimony extracted under questionable circumstances, noted Archbishop Ilara. Her aristocratic features arranged in an expression of practiced concern. Sister Celeste's report indicates these interrogations occurred without proper temple oversight. Celeste, standing slightly behind Naruto, stepped forward. With respect, Your Grace, circumstances necessitated immediate questioning. The evidence was deteriorating, and the prisoners proved unstable once separated from their leader. This was diplomatic understatement. Upon returning to Riverton, they had discovered one of the captives had somehow committed suicide despite restraints and constant supervision. The second had developed a high fever accompanied by delirious ramblings, his condition deteriorating beyond medical intervention by the time they reached the capital. Convenient, Cardinal Domitius remarked. So we have no living witnesses to corroborate these extraordinary claims. We have the captured artifact, Naruto countered, gesturing toward the crystal container now secure. Within a divine containment field at the chamber's center, and the symbol rubbings collected from both Riverton and the forest site. The container's glow had dimmed significantly during transport, the harvested energy within gradually dissipating despite preservation efforts. Nevertheless, its unnatural blue luminescence remained visible, casting ghostly reflections across the polished stone floor. Confessor Thaddeus, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward in his chair. Unlike the other council members with their elaborate vestments, he wore simple dark robes that emphasized his gaunt features and penetrating gaze. The Oracle Priestess believes these findings merit serious consideration, he observed quietly. Her divine sight perceives connections between these events, and ancient warnings preserved in restricted texts. A subtle shift rippled through the council at the mention of Sword Maiden's opinion. Though not present at this session, her rank placing her above routine administrative matters, her influence pervaded the chamber like an invisible current. Her Holiness's insights are always valued, Cardinal Domitius acknowledged with careful neutrality. However, practical response requires concrete evidence rather than mystical interpretation. The political subtext was clear enough. Without directly challenging Sword Maiden's authority, Domitius was establishing boundaries around how much influence her divine sight should have on temple policy, particularly when filtered through outside agents like Naruto. Archbishop Alara tapped manicured fingernails against the armrest of her chair. What precisely are you suggesting we do with this information, Golden Sage? Commit temple resources to hunting shadows based on a single incident. Not a single incident, Naruto corrected. According to guild records, similar disappearances have occurred in at least 7 villages across 3 provinces. All with the same pattern. No violence, no struggle, symbols left behind. This represents coordinated action on a scale beyond typical threats. And you believe these cultists seek to breach dimensional barriers for some nefarious purpose, Confessor Thaddeus summarized. His tone neither accepting nor dismissing the possibility. Their leader referred to something called the Great Convergence, apparently involving the merging of realities. Naruto maintained eye contact with each council member in turn. Whatever their specific goal, their methods involve harvesting human spiritual energy and opening doorways to entities that consume such energy. The threat is real, regardless of how extraordinary it sounds. A heavy silence fell across the chamber as the council members exchanged measured glances, their expressions revealing little of their private assessments. Politics and theology intertwined in their deliberations, each decision balanced against potential impacts on power dynamics within the temple hierarchy. Finally, Cardinal Domitius straightened in his chair. The council will consider these findings in private session. Until formal determination is made, the temple guard will increase patrols in vulnerable regions. And warning communications will be sent to outlying communities. It was the minimum possible response, bureaucratic acknowledgement without substantive action. Naruto had expected nothing more from this initial presentation. The real influence would come through Sword Maiden once he shared the complete details with her directly. Thank you for your consideration, he replied with formal politeness, bowing slightly before turning to leave. One moment, Golden Sage, Archbishop Alara's voice halted his departure. There remains the matter of your continued residence within the cathedral. The purpose of your initial invitation was consultation regarding regional security. Now that you've provided your assessment, is your extended presence still necessary? The question carried barbed implications. Naruto's unusual access to the cathedral's inner workings, and particularly his private consultations with Sword Maiden, had clearly triggered political concerns. Before he could respond, Celeste intervened smoothly. Her Holiness has requested the Golden Sage's continued availability for specialized consultations regarding these matters. Given his unique expertise with unconventional threats, she believes his presence remains valuable during this emerging situation. Archbishop Alara's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, if Her Holiness requires further consultation, we would not presume to interfere. Though perhaps more suitable accommodations could be arranged in the city proper, reducing unnecessary disruption to cathedral routines. The western wing provides appropriate seclusion. Celeste countered respectfully. Her Holiness values efficiency in these consultations, which proximity facilitates. The exchange, couched in perfect politeness, represented the opening moves in what would likely become a protracted political contest. Naruto noted the subtle positioning with interest, Celeste defending his presence with increasing confidence, suggesting Sword Maiden was actively reinforcing her support through private channels. With formal dismissal from the council, Naruto and Celeste departed the chamber, walking in silence until they reached a secluded alcove. They where arched windows overlooked rain-drenched gardens. That went as expected, Naruto observed once they were alone. Celeste sighed, her composed demeanor relaxing slightly. The council rarely acts decisively without extensive deliberation. It's their nature to proceed cautiously, especially with threats they don't fully comprehend. Or don't wish to comprehend, Naruto amended. Acnal. DGING interdimensional threats challenges their theological framework. Easier to dismiss evidence than reconsider fundamental beliefs. Perhaps. Celeste glanced toward the rain-streaked windows. Huff, I suspect political considerations outweigh theological ones in their hesitation. Recognizing a threat of this magnitude would necessitate unified response, potentially strengthening Her Holiness' position if she leads that response effectively. Naruto nodded, impressed by her political acumen. And certain factions would prefer to maintain the current balance of power. Precisely. Celeste turned back to him. Her expression serious. Her Holiness wishes to see you once you've refreshed yourself from the journey. The events at Riverton concern her greatly, both for their broader implications and their potential connection to her condition. All come immediately. This takes precedence over personal comfort. Celeste's lips curved in a small smile. Nevertheless, perhaps a change of clothing would be advisable. Even gold-ranked adventurers benefit from dry garments. Naruto glanced down at his still damp clothing and conceded the point with a chuckle. Fair enough. Where will Her Holiness receive me? The Azure Study. It's more private than the reflection chamber, suitable for discussions of sensitive matters. Celeste hesitated before adding, she's been experiencing increased difficulties since our departure. The nightmares have intensified, apparently triggered by discussions of the goblin-related activities. The connection grows stronger, Naruto murmured, concern evident in his voice. Her trauma and these events may be linked more directly than we initially believed. That possibility troubles her greatly. Celeste's expression reflected genuine worry. She fears her personal history may somehow relate to these cultists' activities, though she cannot articulate how. I'll come as quickly as possible, Naruto promised. Some answers may emerge during our next healing session. After changing into dry clothing and centering himself through brief meditation, Naruto followed Celeste's directions to the Azure Study, a modestly sized chamber located in a secluded tower of the cathedral's eastern section. Unlike the grand ceremonial spaces or formal meeting rooms, this area suggested personal retreat rather than official function. Finely woven tapestries depicting celestial scenes adorned walls of warm-toned wood, while comfortable furnishings arranged around a central fireplace created an atmosphere of scholarly contemplation. Sword Maiden awaited him there, seated in a high-backed chair near the crackling hearth. Without her formal religious vestments, dressed instead in a simple blue gown that complemented the room's decor, she appeared younger and more approachable, though the ceremonial blindfold remained in place, a constant reminder of both her affliction and her divine connection. Golden Sage, she greeted him, her head turning toward the sound of his entrance. Thank you for coming so promptly after your journey. I trust the council received your report with appropriate consideration. Appropriate to their political interests. If not the severity of the threat, Naruto replied, accepting her gesture toward a nearby chair. They've agreed to minimal precautionary measures while they deliberate the broader implications. A faint smile touched Sword Maiden's lips. A diplomatic assessment. Cardinal Domitius would have been more dismissive, I imagine, while Archbishop Ilara focused on procedural concerns rather than substantive response. Your insights into their personalities prove accurate, Naruto acknowledged, impressed by her political awareness despite her isolation from the meeting. When one cannot see faces, one learns to recognize patterns in behavior. Sword Maiden's hands rested in her lap, fingers lightly interlaced. Sister Celeste provided a preliminary report of your discoveries. But I would hear the complete account from you directly, particularly regarding the interdimensional aspects. Naruto recounted the events at Riverton and the forest ruins in detailed sequence, including specific observations about the energy signatures, the ancient doorway, and the entity that had begun to manifest. He described the leader's partial transformation, the Byakugan eye suggesting direct connection to his world, and the cultists' references to the Great Convergence as their ultimate goal. Sword Maiden listened without interruption, her posture gradually tensing as the narrative progressed. When he mentioned the extraction of spiritual energy from villagers, her fingers tightened visibly against each other. This harvesting process, she asked when he finished, would it leave physical marks on the victims? Not necessarily, Naruto replied. The technique targets spiritual essence rather than physical body. Victims might show signs of extreme exhaustion or disorientation. but not obvious external injuries. Sword Maiden's lips pressed into a thin line. During my captivity by goblins, there were procedures conducted that I've never fully understood. Rituals, performed by someone who wasn't goblin, a robed figure who spoke in languages I didn't recognize. The admission hung in the air between them, its significance unmistakable. This connection between our personal trauma and the current threat explained both her intensified nightmares and her determination to understand what was happening. You believe they may have performed similar extraction techniques on you, Naruto stated carefully. Watching her reaction, I've always assumed the physical and psychological torture was their only purpose, she replied, her voice steady despite the difficult subject. But certain aspects never aligned with typical goblin behavior, specifically, their careful preservation of my eyes even after blinding me. Naruto considered this new information. I have been preserving your divine connection. If these cultists understand the relationship between spiritual energy and dimensional barriers, they would recognize the unique properties of an oracle's essence, making me a valuable test subject rather than merely a victim of opportunity. Sword Maiden's expression remained composed, though Naruto detected the emotional strain beneath her controlled facade. This possibility has haunted me since Sister Celeste's initial report of your findings. It would explain why your nightmares have intensified as their activities increase, Naruto observed. If they performed early experiments on you years ago, the resonance between similar energies might create unconscious connection. A connection that might prove useful in locating their current operations. Sword Maiden concluded, her analytical mind finding practical application despite the personal horror involved. During our healing sessions, could we potentially explore these FIC memories to identify details I may have suppressed? Potentially, Naruto acknowledged, though with reservation. But it would be extremely difficult psychologically. Those memories are central to your trauma. Approaching them directly without sufficient preparation could cause significant setback. Yet time may be limited if they continue accelerating their activities. Sword Maiden's determination was evident in her posture. I've endured these wounds for years, Golden Sage. If confronting them directly serves greater purpose than merely my personal healing, the risk becomes acceptable. Naruto studied her with newfound respect. Despite her vulnerabilities, Sword Maiden possessed courage that many warriors would envy, willingness to face her deepest fears for purposes beyond herself. We can attempt targeted exploration, he conceded. But with strict limitations and careful support structure. Your healing remains important regardless of external circumstances. Agreed. She nodded, tension easing slightly from her shoulders. When can we begin? Now, if you're prepared. Naruto shifted forward in his chair. This setting provides adequate privacy, and addressing this immediately may help reduce your current distress. Sword Maiden drew a measured breath before nodding. I am prepared, though perhaps with one adjustment. Her hands rose to her blindfold, fingers hesitating at its edges. For this work, I think complete honesty requires removing certain barriers. With deliberate movements, she untied the ceremonial blindfold, lowering it to reveal eyes physically intact but clouded with milky blindness. The scarring around them told stories of precise, calculated damage, wounds inflicted with intimate knowledge of ocular anatomy to ensure permanent blindness without visible disfigurement. The vulnerability of this gesture wasn't lost on Naruto. Few were permitted to see the oracle without her symbolic blindfold. Its removal represented trust beyond mere professional cooperation. Thank you, he said simply, acknowledging what the action represented. If we are to build bridges between wounded souls, certain walls must be lowered, she replied, setting the blindfold aside. Without its covering, her expressions became more readable, the subtle movements around her sightless eyes revealing emotional nuances previously hidden. Naruto moved his chair closer, positioning himself directly before her. I'll establish the connection as before, but this time we'll focus on creating a secure framework before exploring specific memories. Like buoy, a shelter before venturing into a storm. An apt metaphor. Sword Maiden extended her hands, palms upward in a gesture of openness. I place my trust in your guidance. Taking her hands in his, Naruto began channeling chakra to establish the energy bridge between them. The connection formed more readily than during their first session, her system recognizing and accepting his energy with less resistance. The temporary stabilization he had previously created had mostly dissipated, but its pathways remained, facilitating this new connection. The initial framework remains partially intact, he observed. Your system retains the pattern, which suggests good compatibility with this healing approach. As their energy systems synchronized, Naruto extended his awareness deeper, moving beyond surface impressions to the complex landscape of her spiritual wounds. With greater clarity than before, he perceived the systematic nature of the damage, layers of trauma organized with almost architectural precision, suggesting deliberate rather than random infliction. There's unusual structure to your spiritual injuries, he commented as he worked. Most trauma creates chaotic disruption patterns, but yours show evidence of calculated design, as though the damage itself was purposeful rather than merely consequential. Sword Maiden's expression tightened. They were methodical in their approach. Each new pain built upon previous ones, escalating in precise increments. Beyond typical torture psychology, Naruto concluded, continuing to establish supportive energy pathways around the damaged areas. This resembles experimental procedure more than simple cruelty. As he worked, Naruto gradually introduced healing energy to strengthen Sword Maiden's natural spiritual bond. Aries, reinforcing her sense of safety and control before attempting to address specific traumatic memories. Unlike physical healing that repaired damaged tissue directly, soul healing required build-in. The patient's capacity for self-restoration, creating conditions where natural healing processes could function effectively. I'm establishing stronger protective boundaries around your core spiritual center, he explained. Think of it as reinforcing the foundations of a house before repairing the damaged roof. With these boundaries in place, exploring difficult memories becomes less overwhelming. Sword Maiden nodded, her breathing steady despite the increasing intensity of the connection between them. I feel the difference, like armor being fitted precisely to my dimensions. Exactly. Naruto continued the careful reinforcement, noting how readily her energy system integrated his supportive structures. You have remarkable natural resilience. Despite extensive damage, your core spiritual identity remains intact and responsive. Necessity demanded survival, she replied simply. The alternative was unacceptable. After establishing sufficient protective framework, Naruto shifted to the next phase. Now we'll create a secure space for memory exploration. I'll guide your consciousness toward creating an internal sanctuary, a place within your mind where difficult memories see and be observed without becoming immersive experiences. This technique combined elements of Yamanaka clan mental practices with meditation methods he'd learned from the toads of Mount Myoboku, Adapta. For healing purposes rather than information extraction. The approach created psychological distance between traumatized individuals and their memories, allowing examination without re-traumatization. Imagine a location where you feel completely safe, he instructed. Somewhere real or imagined where nothing can harm you. Visualize it in complete detail. The sensory elements, the atmosphere, the boundaries that define it. Sword Maiden's expression softened, her sightless eyes seeming to look inward. There's a small chapel in the northern mountains where I retreated after my rescue. Stone walls 3 feet thick. A single entrance with heavy doors, windows too narrow for entry. A place of perfect silence except for a small spring that emerges from the rock itself. Excellent. Construct this space completely in your mind. Hear the water, feel the stone, sense the quality of light and air. Naruto guided her through establishing this mental sanctuary, using his chakra connection to reinforce its psychological reality. As the mental space solidified in her consciousness, Naruto carefully introduced the next stage. This sanctuary is where we'll examine memories without being consumed by them. They'll appear as distinct objects, perhaps scrolls or pictures, that can be observed with emotional distance. Sword Maiden nodded, fully engaged in the process. I understand. The memo. Rise remain real but separated from immediate experience. Exactly. Now, without leaving your sanctuary, consider the memory of the robed figure you mentioned, the non-goblin who performed unusual rituals. Allow that memory to materialize as an object within your safe space. Tension returned to Sword Maiden's features as she engaged with this difficult recollection. Her fingers tightened around Naruto's hands, but her breathing remained controlled, the protective framework holding despite the psychological strain. It appears as a dark crystal, she described after several moments. Opaque, but with occasional flashes of light from within, like glimpses rather than complete visibility. That's appropriate representation, Naruto encouraged. The partial opacity reflects your mind's protective mechanisms. Don't force complete clarity yet, just observe what's naturally visible. Through their energy connection, Naruto could perceive shadow impressions of what Sword Maiden examined, no. The specific images but the emotional resonance and energy patterns associated with them. The memory carried distinctive disruption signatures similar to what he'd encountered at the forest ruins, Information that the same type of energy manipulation had been involved in both situations. What do you see in the flashes of clarity? He asked gently. A figure in layered robes, Sword Maiden replied, her voice becoming more distant as she focused on the memory. Face concealed by a hood decorated with symbols, similar to those you described from the forest doorway. They spoke in two langua, Jess, giving orders to the goblins in their crude tongue, then switching to another language for the ritual components. Can you recall any specific words or sounds from this second language? Sword Maiden's brow furrowed in concentration. Syllables that seemed to fold into themselves, sounds that shouldn't fit together yet somehow did. One phrase repeated often, Rin ne tensei, spoken during the procedures involving my eyes. Naruto carefully controlled his reaction, though the phrase sent ice through his veins. Rinne tensei, the reincarnation technique associated with the Rinnegan's power over life and death. Its mention confirmed his worst suspicions about the connection between these events and his world's forbidden techniques. This is valuable information, he acknowledged without revealing his recognition. The protective framework is holding well. Can you observe anything about the procedures themselves? Sword Maiden's expression tightened, but she continued with remarkable composure. They used instruments of crystal and metal, positioned around my head in specific arrangements. Pain beyond description followed, but strangely localized, as though they extracted mething through my eyes without physically removing them. The description aligned perfectly with chakra extraction techniques, specifically those targeting ocular chakra pathways. In Naruto's world, such procedures typically accompanied the transplantation of dojutsu like the Sharingan or Byakugan. Here, the purpose would differ, but the fundamental approach remained recognizable. You're doing extremely well, he encouraged, monitoring her spiritual stability through their connection. One final aspect if you can manage it, any indication of what they sought to accomplish through these procedures. Sword Maiden's sightless eyes narrowed in concentration. The robed figure spoke of calibration and resonance testing. They seemed disappointed with initial results but noted, unexpected adaptive capacity that warranted extended observation. As though your response differed from their expectations, Naruto interpreted. Yes. Her expression shifted toward realization. They planned to kill me afterward. I heard them instruct the goblins to dispose of the subject once final readings were complete. But something in their measurements changed their minds. Your divine connection, Naruto suggested. They likely detected your latent spiritual capabilities, what later manifested as your oracle abilities. Sword Maiden nodded slowly. That would explain why they blinded me without killing me. They were studying my adaptation to the procedure. The implications settled between them. Her torment had included being an unwitting test subject for early experiments in cross-dimensional energy manipulation. The trauma that had shaped her life represented more than random cruelty. It constituted calculated research that had apparently continued and expanded in the years since. I believe we've gathered sufficient insights for this session, Naruto said gently, noting signs of increasing strain despite her remarkable composure. The protective framework needs me to integrate fully with your natural energy system. Yes, I feel the fatigue setting in, Sword Maiden acknowledged. Though this has been extraordinarily valuable, both for understanding my experiences and potentially addressing the current threat, Naruto began the careful process of disengaging their energy connection while maintaining the protective structures he'd established. Unlike the first session's temporary stabilization, these reinforcements were designed for permanence, foundational elements upon which further healing could build. The framework will remain intact between sessions, he explained as their energies gradually separated. You may notice increased emotional stability and possibly reduced nightmare intensity as it strengthens your natural boundaries. When the connection fully dissolved, Sword Maiden exhaled slowly, fatigue evident in her posture despite the session's positive outcomes. Her hands remained in his for a moment longer than strictly necessary. The physical contact providing tangible reassurance after such vulnerable psychological work. "Thank you," she said simply as she finally withdrew her hands. "For your skill certainly, but more for your approach. Many healers have treated me as a damaged object to be repaired rather than a person to be understood." "Understanding precedes healing," Naruto replied. "Particularly with wounds of the spirit." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken eventually by Sword Maiden retrieving her ceremonial blindfold. As she prepared to replace it, Naruto noted how the gesture seemed more practical than defensive now, a functional choice rather than a barrier against vulnerability. "The information about the Rinne Tensei reference concerns you," she observed perceptively as she secured the blindfold in place. "You recognized the term." Naruto considered how much to reveal. Complete honesty about his origins remained problematic, but partial truth would serve their developing trust better than evasion. "It relates to ancient techniques for manipulating the boundary between life and death," he acknowledged. "In traditions of studied, such methods require enormous spiritual power and typically result in the user's death when fully implemented. Yet these cultists attempt such techniques without apparent regard for traditional limitations," Sword Maiden noted. "Suggesting either foolhardy recklessness or knowledge of modifications unknown to conventional practice." "Most likely both," Naruto agreed. "The leader I encountered displayed physical transformations sting partially successful implementation of forbidden techniques. They're experimenting with dangerous methods, achieving limited results while risking catastrophic consequences." A troubling assessment. Sword Maiden adjusted her posture, visibly gathering her strength despite lingering fatigue. "The Temple Council will require more concrete evidence before committing significant resources. We need to identify their current operation centers. I've requested guild assistance tracking similar incidents across the region," Naruto informed her. "The pattern of disappearances should reveal geographical focus points." "An excellent approach." Sword Maiden nodded approval. "I've also arranged a meeting with the kingdom's Shadow Operations Division. Their intelligence networks extend beyond what either temple or guild can access officially." This represented significant escalation. Shadow Operations functioned as the kingdom's covert intelligence and enforcement agency, operating with considerable autonomy from both religious and commercial institutions. Their involvement indicated Sword Maiden was leveraging her political capital despite the personal risk of drawing greater attention to these matters. "When is this meeting scheduled?" Naruto asked. "This evening. A representative will contact you through discreet channels." Sword Maiden's expression suggested she had already set these arrangements in motion before his return. They've been monitoring unusual activities independently and reached similar conclusions regarding coordinated threat patterns. Their discussion continued briefly, addressing practical next steps before Sword Maiden acknowledged her need for rest following the intensive healing session. As Naruto departed the Azure study, he found Celeste waiting in the adjacent antechamber. Her attentive posture suggesting she had remained nearby throughout their meeting. "Her Holiness will require quiet recovery time," he informed her. The session was productive but demanding. Celeste nodded understanding. "I'll ensure she remains undisturbed." "Did you achieve the insights she hoped for?" "We confirmed connections between her past experiences and current events," Naruto replied carefully. "The implications are significant but require further investigation before definitive conclusions can be drawn." "She trusts you," Celeste observed, her T1 suggesting this represented something remarkable. "More than any healer or counselor she's previously consulted. Trust develops naturally when people share difficult journeys," Naruto responded. "We're navigating challenging territory together, both her personal healing and these broader threats." Celeste studied him with thoughtful assessment before nodding. "Indeed, the messenger mentioned, by Her Holiness will find you near the cathedral's south reflection pool at sunset. The approach will be indirect for security purposes." With this information exchanged, Naruto returned to his quarters to prepare for the evening meeting. The revelations from the healing session had confirmed his worst fears regarding interdimensional manipulation while adding disturbing new dimensions. The Tists had been experimenting with chakra extraction techniques for years, beginning with isolated test subjects like Sword Maiden before escalating to entire villages. The reference to Rinne Tensai S. Augusted their ultimate goal might involve resurrection or transferal between dimensions, perhaps attempting to bring entities from his world into this one, or creating vessels capable of hosting foreign consciousnesses. Whatever their specific intention, the Great Convergence they pursued would likely devastate both worlds if achieved. After recording his observations in coded notes that would remain meaningless to anyone unfamiliar with shinobi cipher techniques, Naruto spent an hour in meditation, processing the complex emotional resonance he had absorbed during Sword Maiden's healing session. Soul healing created temporary connections that allowed emotional transference, an unavoidable aspect of the work that required regular centering practices to maintain the healer's own stability. As sunset approached, Naruto made his way to the South Reflection Pool, a modest water feature nestled within a small courtyard rarely frequented by cathedral staff. The rain had finally ceased, leaving the stone benches surrounding the pool slick with moisture that reflected the twilight sky in scattered patches. He positioned himself on the eastern side, apparently absorbed in contemplation of the water's surface while maintaining awareness of his surroundings. The Shadow Operative's approach was impressive even by shinobi standards. No footsteps, no displacement of air, simply a presence that materialized beside him as though assembled from the gathering shadows themselves. Golden Sage, a female voice acknowledged quietly. Your reputation for punctuality serves you well. Naruto turned slightly to observe his new companion. She wore fitted clothing of charcoal gray rather than the black associated with theatrical assassins, practical attire that would blend with urban shadows without appearing conspicuous in normal settings. Dark hair pulled back in a severe style emphasized sharp features and calculating eyes that assessed him with professional thoroughness. You have me at a disadvantage, he replied, noting the multiple concealed weapons her clothing disguised. At least 3 blades and what appeared to be poisoned needles in specialized forearm sheaths. Valeria Nightshade, Shadow Operations, Special Assessment Division. She remained standing while he sat, deliberately maintaining height advantage. I'm assigned to evaluate unusual threats that transcend conventional categories, like interdimensional incursions and chakra harvesting cults. Her expression revealed nothing, but her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Interesting terminology. Chakra isn't a recognized energy classification in standard magical taxonomy. Perhaps your taxonomy needs expansion, Naruto suggested mildly. Perhaps. Valeria seated herself precisely 3 feet away, close enough for quiet conversation. Sufficient distance for defensive reaction if necessary. Your file contains numerous inconsistencies, Golden Sage. Extraordinary combat capabilities without formal martial training. Healing techniques that violate established thaumaturgical principles. No verifiable history before your appearance 3 years ago. I wasn't aware Shadow Operations maintained files on guild adventurers. Naruto commented, unsurprised but curious about her directness. We maintain files on potential assets and potential threats, she replied evenly. Your classification remains undetermined, hence this evaluation meeting. Precisely. Valeria produced a small leather folio from within her clothing. These are locations where incidents matching the Riverton pattern have occurred within the past 6 months. 17 confirmed cases, 3 additional suspected but unverified. She spread a map between them, locations marked with precise notation. The distribution initially appeared random until Naruto recognized the underlying pattern, a spiraling arrangement centered on a mountainous region approximately 100 miles northeast of their current position. The Blighted Peaks, he identified, recognizing the topographical features. Supposedly uninhabitable due to residual corruption from the Demon War era. Supposedly, Valeria agreed. Yet our monitoring stations have detected increased movement in the region. Supplies transported through cutout arrangements, specialized equipment redirected through multiple intermediaries, individuals with particular skill sets disappearing from their normal haunts only to reappear months later with unexplained financial windfalls. You believe they've established operation centers within the Blighted Zone. The evidence suggests multiple facilities, Valeria confirmed. A central research installation supported by smaller processing outposts. The pattern of disappearances corresponds to supply requirements for large-scale magical experimentation. specifically, requiring living subjects with particular spiritual characteristics. Naruto studied the distribution pattern more carefully. They selecting villages with historical connections to divine worship. Communities with active shrines or religious traditions. Correct. Populations with higher than average spiritual development through generational devotional practices. Valerius' clinical assessment couldn't entirely mask underlying concern. Essentially harvesting specialized crops they've allowed to develop naturally over decades or centuries. The calculated cruelty of this approach reinforced Naruto's determination to stop these operations. Not only were they causing immediate suffering to hundreds of innocents, but their tampering with interdimensional forces threatened potential catastrophe on a much larger scale. Shadow Operations has authorized preliminary investigation of the suspected central facility, Valeria continued. Based on your demonstrated capabilities at Riverton and previous encounters with similar phenomena, you're being offered temporary operational attachment to this mission. Under your command, Naruto asked, understanding the underlying dynamics. Under my evaluation, she corrected precisely. The mission structure acknowledges your combat expertise while reserving strategic authority with Shadow Operations. Reasonable arrangement for initial cooperation, Naruto acknowledged. What's the mission timeline? Immediate departure. Operation commencement at dawn. Valeria returned the map to her folio. The team assembles at the North Gate in 1 hour. Bring essential equipment for 3 days field operation in corrupted territory. I'll need to inform the Oracle Priestess of this development. Naruto noted, watching for her reaction. Already addressed through appropriate channels, Valeria replied smoothly. Her Holiness authorized your participation before this meeting was arranged. This confirms Sword Maiden's direct involvement in escalating the response to these threats, using her influence to initiate Shadow Operations involvement while maintaining official distance through institutional protocols. Politically astute while practically effective. 1 hour, Naruto confirmed, rising from the bench. North Gate. Valeria nodded once before aiming to dissolve back into the gathering darkness, her departure as impressive as her arrival. Naruto remained momentarily, considering the rapid developments since his return to the capital. Within a single day, the investigation had expanded from temple deliberation to direct Shadow Operations involvement, with his role shifting from consultant to field operative. The acceleration suggested CTORS beyond what had been explicitly shared, perhaps additional intelligence known to Sword Maiden through her divine sight, or information Shadow Operations possessed but kept closely guarded. Whatever the full circumstances, the trajectory was clear. Direct confrontation with the cult's operations would come sooner rather than later. Returning to his quarters, Naruto prepared efficiently for field deployment. His standard equipment remained ready from the Riverton investigation. Weapons, specialized tools, and field supplies organized for immediate access. The only significant addition was a small scroll containing emergency communication seals linked to Gamakichi, providing last resort extraction capabilities should circumstances become truly dire. As he completed his preparations, a soft knock announced Celeste's arrival. She entered carrying a slender wooden case approximately 2 feet long. Her Holiness asked me to deliver this for your upcoming mission, she explained, presenting the case with formal respect. She believes it may prove useful in the corrupted territories. Naruto accepted the case, releasing its simple clasp to reveal a ceremonial dagger nestled in velvet lining. The blade gleamed with distinctive silver-gold alloy, its surface etched with blessing symbols associated with purification rituals. The hilt contained a small reservoir visible through Krista L insets, currently empty but designed to hold consecrated substances. A purifier's blade, Celeste explained. Ancient design from before the standardization of temple artifacts. Its properties are particularly effective against corrupted entities and tainted environments. The reservoir accepts either holy water or the wielder's blood, depending on the specific application required. Temple blood magic. Naruto raised an eyebrow, surprised to find such practices acknowledged within the cathedral's orthodox environment. Early temple traditions incorporated aspects modern doctrine considers problematic. Celeste replied carefully. Her Holiness believes practical effectiveness outweighs theological purity when addressing existential threats. Another indication of Sword Maiden's agmatic approach beneath her formal religious role. The blade represented significant trust, Such artifacts were rarely permitted outside direct temple control, their existence sometimes denied in official doctrinal statements. "Please convey my appreciation for Her Holiness's foresight," Naruto said, securing the blade within his equipment. "The blade's properties may indeed prove valuable where we're going. She also asked me to convey a personal message," Celeste added, her expression softening slightly. "She will focus her divine sight toward your mission during tomorrow's morning devotions, seeking insights that might assist your team. If significant visions occur, communication will be attempted through temple channels." This represented both practical support and personal concern. Sword Maiden leveraging her oracle abilities specifically to aid his mission while establishing potential communication despite the political risks involved. "Thank you, Sister Celeste, both for the delivery and for supporting Her Holiness during these challenging developments." Naruto's sincere appreciation clearly registered, as her formal demeanor warmed slightly. "Her well-being matters to me above all else," she replied simply. "Your healing work has provided hope where little existed before. For that alone, you have my gratitude regardless of these broader concerns." With final preparations complete, Naruto departed the cathedral through side passages that minimized visibility, making his way toward the north gate where shadow operations would assemble their team. The city streets lay quiet in the early evening hours, though the commercial districts would remain active well into the night. He moved with purpose but without obvious haste, maintaining the unremarkable presence that experienced operatives cultivated in urban environments. The North Gate presented less imposing architecture than its southern counterpart, its design prioritizing functional defense over ceremonial grandeur. Trade caravans and agricultural supplies entered primarily through this access point, resulting in broader roadways and more practical infrastructure. As darkness settled completely, irregular traffic had dwindled to occasional merchants rushing final deliveries before curfew regulations limited major transport. Naruto identified the Shadow Operations Assembly Point not through obvious markings but by the distinctive spacing of supposedly independent travelers near the customs verification station. 5 individuals maintaining precise distances from each other while effecting no connection, the unmistakable pattern of a covert team awaiting final members. Valeria acknowledged his arrival with the barest nod before leading the group toward a nondescript way station 50 yards beyond the gate. Once inside the simple stone building, the team's professional demeanor shifted subtly, transitioning from public cover to operational focus. "Preliminary briefing," Valeria announced without preamble. "Our target is a suspected research facility located here." She indicated a position on a detailed map spread across the central table. "Approximately 30 hours travel at standard pace, requiring passage through corrupted territories in the final approach." The location corresponded to Naruto's earlier assessment, a valley nestled within the blighted peaks, surrounded by terrain considered impassable due to lingering magical contamination from ancient conflicts. Conventional forces would indeed find such approach nearly impossible, explaining why Shadow Operations had been activated rather than regular military assets. "Team composition is specialized for this environment," Valeria continued, indicating each member in turn. "Rafe handles contamination detection and protection. Mira provides ranged elimination capabilities. Dorn manages physical security and barrier neutralization. Lissa specializes in information extraction and verification." Each operative nodded at their introduction. A wiry man with specialized detection equipment, a woman whose modified crossbow suggested alchemical ammunition, a heavily built individual carrying modular equipment components, and a deceptively delicate-appearing person whose only visible tool was a crystal monocle on a silver chain. "The Golden Sage joins as a special tactical asset," Valeria concluded. His articular capabilities proved effective against similar threats during the Riverton incident. "The adventurer?" Dorn questioned, skepticism evident in his gruff tone. "Guild rankings are commercially motivated, not operationally verified." Quote, "His verification occurred during practical engagement," Valeria replied flatly. "I've reviewed the evidence personally. His tactical value exceeds standard metrics." The simple statement carried sufficient authority to end immediate questioning, though Naruto noted the lingering assessment in each operative's gaze. Shadow Operations personnel worked within rigid command structures but maintained healthy professional skepticism, his acceptance would depend on demonstrated capability rather than reported reputation. Mission parameters, Valeria continued. Returning focus to operational details. Primary objective is confirmation of facility purpose and capabilities. Secondary objective is identification of leadership structure. Tertiary objective is recovery of subjects if viable extraction routes exist. This is intelligence focused with minimal engagement unless circumstances dictate otherwise. The briefing continued with specific approach vectors, communication protocols, and contingency arrangements. Shadow operations methodology impressed Naruto with its precision and thoroughness, comparable to Anbu procedures from his world but Ada. PTED to this realm's particular challenges. Each aspect of the mission had been analyzed with multiple fallback positions established for likely complications. Specialized Equipment Distribution, AEF announced when the briefing concluded, opening several sealed containers. Anti-corruption measures require regular application in blighted territories. Standard protection fails approximately 6 hours after exposure without reinforcement. He distributed crystalline vials containing luminous green liquid, securing 4 to each team member's equipment harness. Application is transdermal. Pre-SS activation seal in place against major pulse points. Protection radiates outward approximately 3 feet, creating overlap with proper team positioning. Additional specialized equipment follow. Communication devices utilizing modified divination techniques rather than conventional sound, detection tools calibrated for corruption manifestations, and weapons designed to affect entities sustained by blighted energy. The technological integration of magical principles demonstrated sophistication beyond what Naruto had previously encountered in this world. We move in 20 minutes, Valeria concluded. Final equipment checks and personal preparations now. As the team dispersed to their assigned tasks, Valeria approached Naruto directly, her expression carefully neutral. The Oracle's blade is an unexpected addition to your resources, she observed quietly. Her holiness extends significant trust. Our objectives align, Naruto replied simply. Stopping these cultists serves both temple interests and broader protection. Indeed, Valeria studied him with renewed assessment. Though I wonder if her interest extends beyond institutional concerns. The personal attention of an oracle is uncommon. The implied question hung between them, professional intelligence gathering rather than mere curiosity. Naruto considered his response carefully, aware that shadow operations undoubtedly monitored relationships that might influence key religious figures. Her holiness values effective approaches to complex problems, he replied evenly. My methods offer perspectives outside conventional temple resources. Diplomatic answer, Valeria acknowledged with the faintest suggestion of a smile. We'll proceed with operational focus regardless of underlying motivations. Be aware that connections to figures of her prominence attract particular attention, both official and otherwise. The warning carried multiple layers: personal caution, operational security concerns, and perhaps something approaching professional courtesy from one skilled operative to another. Naruto nodded acknowledgement without further comment, recognizing the complex institutional politics that surrounded their mission despite its practical necessity. Final preparations completed with practiced efficiency, the team departed through a secondary gate normally reserved for maintenance access. Their exit recorded in official logs under agricultural inspection designations that would attract minimal attention. Within minutes they had left the capital's immediate environs, following obscure trails that paralleled main roadways without exposing them to casual observation. Their pace through the night demonstrated the team's superior conditioning and field experience. Unlike conventional military units that relied on established supply lines and regular rest intervals, shadow operatives maintained continuous movement with rotating recovery periods, individual members alternating tend awareness with controlled restoration techniques that maximized endurance without compromising security. By dawn, they had covered impressive distance, reaching the transitional territories agricultural settlements gave way to increasingly wild landscapes. The corruption influence remained minimal here, but subtle signs marked their approach to blighted regions, vegetation displaying unnatural growth patterns, small animals exhibiting behavioral anomalies, and occasional geological formations that defied normal erosion principles. First anti-corruption application at mid-morning. Valeria instructed as they established temporary position in a defensible ravine. Rafe will monitor contamination levels and adjust protocol as required. The brief rest period provided opportunity for more substantive interaction with the team. Mira approached Naruto as he performed standard equipment maintenance, her professional curiosity evidently overcoming operational reserve. Your techniques at Riverton. She began without preamble. The reports described energy manipulation unlike standard magical classifications. Adaptive manifestation rather than formulaic implementation. Naru, to noted her specific terminology, language associated with theoretical magical research rather than field operations. You have academic background in thaumaturgical principles, he observed. Previous life, she acknowledged with a shrug. Before certain research directions proved incompatible with institutional limitations, leading to shadow operations recruitment, Naruto concluded, understanding the implied history. Individuals whose capabilities exceeded conventional boundaries often found themselves with limited institutional options, adapt to arbitrary restrictions or seek organizati. Ons with more flexible approaches to unusual talents. Something similar brought you to the Adventurers Guild, I imagine, Mira suggested, watching his reaction carefully. Something similar. Naruto agreed without elaboration. Unconventional capabilities require appropriate application frameworks. Indeed, she gestured toward his equipment. Your implementations utilize energy circulation principles rather than external manifestation formulas. Self-contained rather than environmentally dependent. The observation demonstrated genuine insight into fundamental differences between his Acra techniques and this world's magical systems. Where local magic typically manipulated external energies through formulaic structures, chakra utilized internal energy circulation through established D pathways, a distinction with significant practical implications in corrupted territories where external energy sources became unreliable or contaminated. An accurate assessment, Naruto acknowledged. Different foundational approach producing different operational capabilities. And limitations, she added perceptively. Self-contained systems face resource constraints that external draw methods avoid. Though in corrupted environments, the reverse applies. Every system has optimal application contexts, Naruto agreed, appreciating her analytical understanding despite her limited information. Their conversation might have continued, but Valeria signaled resumption of movement. The team reassembled with practiced coordination, continuing their journey as terrain gradually transformed around them. Vegetation became sparser and more distorted, normal coloration giving way to unsettling shades of purple-gray and sickly yellow. The air itself changed quality, not precisely thickness, but something approaching textural variation, as though certain sections required more effort to pass through than others. By midday, they had reached the official boundary of blighted territory, Mar. Ked by ancient warning stones placed after the Demon War to designate contaminated regions. Beyond this point, standard magical protections degraded rapidly, and conventional living creatures became increasingly rare. The corruption manifested in tangible effects, areas where gravity seemed slightly altered, patches of ground that rippled like liquid despite apparent solidity, and occasionally small rifts in the air itself that displayed glimpses of impossible geometries before collapsing back into normal space. Rafe distributed the anti-corruption measures as planned, demonstrating proper application technique. Press firmly against carotid, brachial, femoral, and posterior tibial pulse points in sequence, he instructed. The protection establishes through bloodstream distribution, ing emanating barrier that repels corruption particles. The application produced immediate sensory effect, a tingling sensation that spread outward from each pulse point until it covered the entire body in a barely perceptible protective layer. Through Sage Mode perception, Naruto could detect how the substance established harmonic resonance with natural life energy, creating interference patterns that neutralized corruption influences before they could affect cellular structures. Effective range is approximately 3 feet, Rafe reminded them as they prepared to continue. Maintain appropriate spacing during movement but close formation during stationary periods. Protection weakens progressively after 5 hours, requiring reapplication before complete degradation. Their progress slowed considerably as they penetrated deeper into blighted territory. The landscape became increasingly hostile to normal traversal, paths that appeared solid proving dangerously unstable, areas of intensified corruption requiring careful circumnavigation, and occasionally temporal distortions that created disorienting effects where team members experienced slightly different time flows until returning to synchronized zones. Despite these challenges, the team maintained remarkable operational cohesion. Each member clearly possessed extensive experience navigating corrupted environments, their movements and decisions reflecting both formal training and practical field adaptations. They communicated through minimal gestures when possible, reserving specialized divination devices for circumstances requiring complex coordination. By late afternoon, they had reached a ridgeline overlooking a valley that contained their first significant discovery, a processing outpost positioned approximately 15 miles from their ultimate destination. The facility appeared deliberately modest, a collection of simple structures that might be mistaken for abandoned mining operations by casual observation. Only the regular patrol patterns of guards and the specialized detection equipment positioned at strategic intervals revealed its current operational status. Forward observation position, Valeria directed, indicating a protected alcove providing unobstructed view of the facility. Lissa, preliminary assessment. The intelligence specialist adjusted her crystal monocle, focusing on the NT structures with intense concentration. Approximately 20 personnel visible through regular rotation. Guard patterns suggest standard 3-shift coverage with overlapping transition periods. SP. ECI leased transport equipment on the eastern approach, recently used based on compression patterns in the corruption field. Her assessment continued with remarkable detail despite the considerable distance. The monocle apparently providing enhanced observational capabilities beyond normal vision. Subject processing capacity appears limited, temporary holding rather than extended containment. Regu. LAR transport to central facility indicated by established transit corridor with corruption repulsion markers. Recent activity. Valeria prompted. Within 12 hours, Lissa confirmed. Residual. Energy signatures indicate minimum of 5 subjects processed and transported. Corruption pattern disruption suggests eastbound movement toward central facility. The implications were clear. They delocated an active collection point in the cultists' operation network, where captured victims underwent initial processing before transfer to the main research installation. The timeline indicated opportunity to potentially intercept subjects before integration into whatever experimental procedures awaited them. Adjustment to mission parameters, Valeria announced after brief consideration. We'll maintain primary intelligence objective while adding subject interception during transport as tactical opportunity. Minimal engagement with processing facility to preserve operational security for central target approach. The team acknowledged this modification with professional efficiency, immediately shifting to planning the interception approach. Dorn produced specialized survey equipment that mapped corruption density patterns along the likely transport route, identifying optimal ambush positions where environmental conditions would provide tactical advantage. Transport typical. Y utilizes specialized carriages with corruption shielding, Mira observed, studying the route analysis. Designed for minimal escort requirements, typically 2 to 3 security personnel relying on environmental hazards as primary defense. Corruption shielding creates detection blind spot, Rafe added. Their own protection prevents sensing approaching threats until visual confirmation. Tactical advantage if properly leveraged. The discussion continued with impressive operational focus, each team member contributing specialized knowledge toward developing effective interception strategy. Naruto observed their methodology with professional appreciation. Despite his initial skepticism about institutional intelligence agencies, Shadow Operations clearly maintained exceptional field capabilities. Golden Sage. Valeria addressed him directly. Your expertise with the entity at Riverton suggests specialized capability against corrupted opponents. Assessment of optimal application in this context. The question represented both practical tactical planning and subtle evaluation of his willingness to integrate with team protocols. Naruto considered his response carefully, balancing operational transparency against necessary discretion regarding his full capabilities. My techniques function effectively in corruption fields due to internal energy circulation, he explained. I can establish perimeter containment while simultaneously engaging priority targets without degradation from environmental factors. Additionally, I can deploy autonomous tactical units that maintain operational coherence despite corruption interference. This description of shadow clones in operational terminology drew interested attention from the team, particularly Mira, whose academic background clearly recognized the theoretical significance of such capabilities. Demonstration scope. Valeria requested, professional evaluation evident in her tone. In response, Naruto formed a single shadow clone without fanfare, the duplicate materializing beside him with none of the theatrical elements that often accompanied magical manifestations in this world. The clone immediately moved to a position 20 feet distant, demonstrating independent operation while remaining within visual confirmation range. Full autonomy with shared tactical awareness, Naruto explained as the team observed with professional interest. Capabilities match original with proportional energy distribution. Physical impact causes dispersal with complete information returned to primary. Fascinating application of bifurcated consciousness principles. Mira remarked, her analytical mind clearly processing the theoretical implications. Without external manifestation framework or sustaining connection requirements. Operational limit. Valeria inquired practically. Variable based on mission requirements and energy allocation, Naruto replied. For current parameters, approximately 12 fully functional units with optimal tactical distribution. This deliberately understated his actual capacity, which far exceeded 12 clones under normal circumstances. Strategic information management remained prudent even with temporary allies, particularly institutional operatives whose ultimate loyalties extended beyond immediate mission parameters. Integration into interception strategy approved, Valeria decided after brief consideration. Primary containment role with secondary target neutralization as tactical situation develops. Dorn coordinates timing synchronization, Mira handles ranged support. Rafe maintains corruption protection integrity, Lissa focuses on subject security and intelligence collection. With roles established, the team settled into observation rotation while finalizing interception preparations. The processing facility maintained consistent activity patterns throughout the evening, suggesting regular operational schedule rather than heightened alert status. No indication of awareness regarding their observation emerged from either guard behavior or security measure adjustments. During his observation shift, Naruto utilized Sage Mode to extend his perceptual range beyond visual confirmation, carefully monitoring energy patterns throughout the valley. The corruption created significant background interference, but distinct signatures remained discernible too. His enhanced senses, particularly the unusual energy configuration associated with the cultists' activities. What he detected confirmed their intelligence assessment while adding concerning new dimensions. The processing conducted within the facility involved preliminary chakra pathway stimulation in captive subjects, artificial activation of energy systems that didn't naturally exist in this world's inhabitants. The procedure appeared designed to prepare subjects for more extensive modifications at the central facility, essentially creating compatible vessels for whatever the cult ultimately intended to manifest through them. Most disturbing, Naruto detected fragmented chakra signatures that shouldn't exist in this realm, remnant patterns suggesting successful transfer of energy structures from his world into local subjects. The implications transcended mere experimentation. These cultists had achieved partial success in cross-dimensional energy transplantation, potentially opening pathways for more significant transference if their work continued unchallenged. When Valeria relieved him for the next observation shift, Naruto shared his findings in terms comprehensible within this world's conceptual framework. Energy manipulation more advanced than previously assessed, he reported quietly. Subjects undergo preliminary alteration here before transport for complete conversion. The process appears cumulative rather than binary, gradual transformation rather than immediate change. Conversion toward what purpose? Valeria asked, her professional demeanor not entirely concealing appropriate concern. Creation of compatible vessels, Naruto replied honestly. Preparing physical forms to host consciousness or energy patterns from elsewhere. Possession methodology, she interpreted with grim understanding. Theological implications aside, the strategic threat assessment elevates significantly if they've achieved viable techniques for consciousness transference. The subjects we intercept may display partial transformation effects, Naruto warned. Potentially including behavioral or cognitive alterations alongside physical changes. Noted. Valerius EXPR. Eshin remained controlled despite the disturbing implications. Containment protocols will adjust accordingly. Rescue prioritizes those with minimal conversion progress, security containment for ADVA. NCED cases until proper assessment can occur. This coldly practical approach reflected institutional necessity rather than callousness. Shadow operations clearly understood that partially converted individuals might present greater threat than benefit if integrated into general population without proper evaluation and containment. While personally uncomfortable with such calculations, Naruto recognized their operational validity in addressing interdimensional contamination risks. Transport preparation detected, Lissa announced softly from her observation position. Vehicle mobilization in Eastern Compound. Subject loading procedures initiated. Estimated departure within 30 minutes based on established patterns. The team transitioned immediately to interception readiness, moving WITH practiced efficiency toward pre-selected positions along the anticipated transport route. The corruption field intensified as they descended into the valley, requiring additional protective measures and careful navigation around particularly dense contamination pockets. Ambush position reached. Dorn confirmed as they established strategic placement where the transport route passed through a narrow ravine with limited evasion options. Barrier preparation commencing. While the team established their positions, Naruto created shadow clones distributed at optimal tactical locations, some visible to provide coordinated response capability, others concealed to ensure operational contingency regardless of initial engagement outcomes. Through their shared awareness, he maintained NSIVE situational monitoring despite the challenging environmental conditions. The transport carriage appeared approximately 20 minutes later, a specialized vehicle designed specifically for corruption field traversal. Unlike conventional horse-drawn transportation, this conveyance utilized mechanical locomotion powered by crystalline energy sources, its external surface covered with Protect 4E inscriptions that repelled corruption effects. 3 security personnel accompanied the transport, 2 flanking the carriage on similar mechanical devices, 1 operating the vehicle itself. Standard configuration. Valeria confirmed quietly through their communication device. Proceed with planned interception. Non-lethal approach for security personnel to preserve intelligence value. On her signal, Dorn activated prepared barrier devices that materialized shimmering energy fields at both ends of the ravine, effectively trapping the transport within the designated interception zone. The security personnel reacted with professional alertness but showed momentary confusion as their practiced responses encountered unexpected containment methodology. Naruto's shadow clones engaged simultaneously from multiple directions, neutralizing the escort guards with precisely applied force before they could implement effective countermeasures. The transport operator attempted emergency acceleration procedures, but Myra's specialized ammunition disabled the vehicle's crystalline power source with targeted precision, bringing it to a controlled stop without threatening the occupants within. The entire initial engagement concluded in less than 30 seconds, a testament to both shadow operations planning effectiveness and Naruto's tactical implementation. As the team secured the disabled transport, Lissa approached with her crystal monocle activated, scanning the vehicle's interior before attempting physical access. 5 subjects contained, she reported. Varying stages of energy alteration evident. 3 appear minimally processed, 2 show advanced modification patterns. No active restraints detected. Subjects appear sedated or unconscious. Rafe moved forward with Speciale Z equipment to neutralize potential contamination or security measures before opening the transport doors. Atmosphere secure. No detection of airborne agents or triggered defense mechanisms. With appropriate caution, they opened the transport to reveal 5 individuals secured in specialized containment berths, 3 women and 2 men of varying ages, all displaying the distinctive vacant EXPR. Eshin of induced unconsciousness rather than natural sleep. More disturbing were the visible modifications on the 2 subjects Lissa had identified as advanced cases, subtle alterations to facial structure and skin coloration that suggested internal changes far more significant than external appearance indicated. Preliminary assessment confirms artificial energy pathway development, Lissa reported after careful examination. The advanced subjects show complete preliminary conversion, essentially prepared vessels awaiting final procedures at the central facility. Can they be safely transpo? RTED without continuing the conversion process. Valeria asked practically. Temporary stasis is possible with appropriate containment protocols, Rafe confirmed, already preparing specialized equipment from his supplies. Though long-term stability remains questionable without understanding the complete intended procedure. While they assessed the subject's condition, Naruto examined the transport vehicle itself. Particularly the specialized mechanical components that allowed it to function within corruption fields. The technology demonstrated sophisticated integration of magical principles with mechanical engineering, knowledge that transcended typical developmental patterns for this world's civilization. This vehicle incorporates advanced concepts beyond current kingdom technical standards, he observed to Valeria, who had joined his examination. The propulsion system particularly suggests external knowledge influence rather than natural innovation progression. Assessment Mat. Chess Shadow Operations Intelligence regarding technological anomalies, she confirmed. Multiple sectors report accelerated development patterns inconsistent with normal research progression. Suggesting information transfer from external sources rather than independent discovery. The cult's interdimensional connections providing technological advancement alongside their primary objectives, Naruto concluded. Creating multifaceted advantage through knowledge exchange. Precisely our concern. Valerius' expression reflected appropriate gravity. Beyond immediate humanitarian considerations regarding their subjects, the strategic implications of accelerated technological transfer present kingdom-level security concerns. Their discussion was interrupted by Lissa's urgent summons. Subject destabilization, she reported tersely. Advanced conversion case showing spontaneous progression despite procedure interruption. They quickly returned to the transport interior where one of the advanced subjects, a man approximately 30 years old, had begun exhibiting alarming symptoms. His unconscious form convulsed slightly while his skin developed pronounced discoloration patterns resembling crude chakra pathway formations visible beneath the surface. Most concerning, his facial features underwent subtle but accelerating alteration, reorganizing toward configuration that appeared increasingly less human. Conversion continuing without external input, Lissa assessed, monitoring through her specialized monocle. Self-sustaining process triggered by unknown mechanism. Delibera. Te failsafe or natural progression threshold? Valeria questioned sharply. Impossible to determine without additional data, Rafe replied, attempting to apply containment measures that showed minimal effect. Protective countermeasures proving ineffective against internal transformation vectors. Naruto moved closer, extending his senses through partial sage mode to assess the subject's condition directly. What he detected confirmed his worst fears. The artificial chakra network implanted within the man had become self-organizing, drawing corrupted natural energy from the surrounding environment to fuel continued transformation. More alarmingly, the emerging energy pattern contained recognizable signature elements associated with Otsutsuki clan techniques, specifically those designed for vessel preparation and consciousness transference. The process is designed to continue independently once reaching critical threshold, he informed the team. Using environmental energy to complete transformation regardless of external support systems. Can it be neutralized? Valeria asked directly, her hand moving toward weapons clearly intended for containment failure scenarios. Naruto considered the options quickly, balancing humanitarian concerns against security necessities. The transformation had advanced beyond simple reversal, but complete neutralization would effectively kill the subject, an outcome he preferred to avoid if alternatives existed. I can attempt stabilization through counter-resonance, he decided. It won't reverse the process but might establish sustainable equilibrium preventing further degradation. Without waiting for formal approval, Naruto placed his hands directly on the convulsing subject, channeling carefully modulated chakra designed to interfere with the transformation patterns without causing system collapse. The technique required precise calibration. Too much interference would destroy the artificial network entirely, killing the host. Too little would prove ineffective against the self-sustaining conversion process. The subject's body tensed as Naruto's chakra established counter-resonance, the competing energy patterns creating visible disruption effects where they intersected beneath the skin. For several critical moments, the outcome remained uncertain as transformation processes struggled against stabilizing interference. Gradually, the visible convulsions subsided, Though the partial alterations remained, the subject now permanently caught between human and something else, stabilized in transitional state that would require continuous management. Temporary stabilization achieved, Naruto reported, maintaining the delicate energy balance while Rafe applied supplementary containment measures. But permanent solution requires specialized facilities and deeper understanding of the complete conversion process. The other advanced subject, Valeria inquired, gesturing toward the second individual who had shown similar modification patterns. Pre-critical threshold, Lissa confirmed after careful examination. Not yet self-sustaining but requires containment to prevent similar progression. With the immediate crisis addressed, the team implemented appropriate transport arrangements for the intercepted subjects. The 3 minimally processed individuals could be evacuated through standard medical protocols, while the advanced cases required specialized containment measures for safe transportation to secure evaluation facilities. Primary mission continues, Valeria determined once the subjects were properly secured with a smaller team designated for their evacuation. The intelligence value of the central facility remains priority objective, particularly with confirmation of advanced conversion capabilities. Naruto, Valeria, and Mira would continue toward the central facility while Dorn, Rafe, and Lissa manage the evacuation of the intercepted subjects through pre-established extraction routes. This division maximized both operational objectives, securing victims while gathering critical intelligence on the cult's core operations. As the extraction team departed with their charges, Naruto found moment for private conversation with Valeria regarding the implications of what they'd witnessed. The conversion process demonstrates sophisticated understanding of energy manipulation principles, he observed carefully. Beyond theoretical knowledge into practical implementation. Suggesting insider expertise, Valeria agreed. Someone with direct experience rather than merely studying ancient texts or artifacts. The leader I encountered at Riverton displayed physical characteristics indicating personal integration of these techniques, Naruto confirmed. Self-experimentation preceding broader implementation. Consistent with psychological profiles of transformational cult leadership, Valeria noted. Demonstrating ascension through personal transformation to validate promised outcomes for followers. Their analysis continued as they resumed progress toward the central facility, now moving with increased urgency given the confirmed nature of the threat. The corrupt ion field intensified as they penetrated deeper into the blighted peaks, requiring more frequent application of protective measures and careful navigation around areas where reality itself appeared to warp under concentrated contamination. By nightfall, they had reached observation position overlooking their primary target, a sprawling facility nestled within a valley surrounded by corruption-blighted mountains. Unlike the modest processing outpost, this installation displayed more substantial development, multiple structures arranged in concentric patterns around a central building whose architecture incorporated elements distinctly foreign to this world's typical designs. Crystalline towers emerged from otherwise conventional stone construction, their surfaces glowing with pulsing energy that created rippling distortion effects in the surrounding air. Significant operation, Mira assessed as they established secure observation point, far beyond preliminary intelligence estimates in both scale and technological sophistication. Through enhanced optical equipment, they observed activities indicating large-scale operation, dozens of personnel moving between structures with apparent purpose. Specialized equipment being transported between different sections, and security measures that included both conventional guards and what appeared to be partially transformed individuals serving specific containment functions. Most concerning was the central structure itself, where periodic energy surges created visible distortion fields that momentarily revealed glimpses of something vast and complex beneath the surface installation, suggesting the visible facility represented merely the upper portion of much larger operation extending underground. We need closer observation for actionable intelligence, Valeria determined after initial assessment. Perimeter infiltration with minimal footprint. Observation only unless exceptional opportunity presents with acceptable risk profile. The approach required careful navigation through corruption-dense terrain while avoiding detection by the facility's surprisingly sophisticated security measures. Multiple sensor arrays extended beyond conventional perimeter, utilizing both magical detection principles and what appeared to be adapted chakra sensing methodology similar to techniques from Naruto's world. Utilizing Shadow CL, Ones for advance reconnaissance proved invaluable, allowing comprehensive security assessment without risking their primary team. The clones identified patrol patterns, sensor blind spots, and optimal approach vectors that minimized both detection probability and corruption exposure during their infiltration. By midnight, they had established covert observation position within 70 yards of THE central structure, close enough for detailed assessment while maintaining adequate extraction options if discovered. From this vantage point, the full scope of the operation became disturbingly clear. The facility functioned as complete conversion center, where subjects transported from outlying processing stations underwent final transformation procedures. Unlike the crude preliminary modifications observed in the intercepted subjects, these conversions appeared far more sophisticated, carefully calibrated alterations designed for specific functional outcomes rather than merely creating generic vessels. Most alarming were glimpses of the central chamber visible through periodic security transitions. Within this heavily protected space, partially converted subjects connected to elaborate equipment arranged around a central platform where dimensional distortion effects appeared strongest. The configuration suggested extraction and transfer mechanisms, essentially harvesting energy from converted subjects to power larger-scale dimensional manipulation. They're using converted subjects as living conduits, Mira observed with appropriate horror. Channeling harvested energy to power something within that central chamber. Quote, "Dimensional gateway," Naruto confirmed, recognizing the fundamental pattern despite its modified implementation. Similar to the forest doorway but vastly larger scale. They're attempting to create stable passage between dimensions rather than merely summoning individual entities. The implications transcended their initial assessment of isolated cult activities into potential existential threat territory. If successfully activated, such a gateway could allow mass transfer between dimensions, potentially including beings whose presence would catastrophically destabilize this world's fundamental reality structure. This exceeds tactical response parameters, Valeria determined after observing complete operational cycle. Strategic threat assessment. She requires immediate escalation to highest authority levels. Despite this conclusion, they maintained observation through the night, gathering critical intelligence regarding facility operations, personnel patterns, and technological capabilities. The information would prove essential for whatever response eventually mobilized against this threat, providing vulnerability assessment and tactical PP Roach options that might otherwise require costly direct reconnaissance. As dawn approached, they finally withdrew to secure distance for proper communication with their extraction team and operational command. The return journey through corruption fields proceeded with increased urgency, their newfound understanding of the situation lending weight to rapid response necessity. Shadow Operatio. NS will implement kingdom-level response protocols, Valeria informed Naruto as they established temporary position beyond immediate detection range. But bureaucratic processes require time regardless of threat assessment. During that interval, continued intelligence gathering remains priority. The guild network can provide supplementary observation capabilities, Naruto suggested. Particularly regarding outlying processing facilities and transport operations. Coordination between institutional responses would maximize effectiveness. Logical approach, Valeria acknowledged. Your posit. Ion Bridging Guild and Temple provides unique coordination opportunity not available through conventional channels. This represented significant institutional trust. Shadow operations rarely endorsed cross-organizational cooperation without extensive verification processes. That Valeria suggested such approach indicated both the severity of the threat assessment and her professional evaluation of Naruto's reliability despite his unconventional background. I'll establish communication through appropriate channels upon return to the capital, Naruto confirmed. The Oracle's divine sight may provide additional insights regarding vulnerability patterns and optimal intervention timing. Valeria's expression revealed subtle reassessment at this reference to Sword Maiden's capabilities. Her Holiness's involvement elevates response profile considerably. The political implications extend beyond mere operational considerations. The threat justifies exceptional measures, Naruto replied simply. Institutional boundaries become secondary when facing existential risks. Their journey back to extraction coordinates proceeded without significant complications, though the corruption field S effects seemed subtly intensified compared to their inbound passage, suggesting possible relationship between the facility's operational cycles and environmental contamination levels. This correlate added concerning dimension to the threat assessment, indicating the cult's activities actively worsened corruption spread throughout the region. At designated rendezvous point, they reconnected WITH extraction team and recovered subjects, confirming successful stabilization of the advanced cases and proper medical support for less affected individuals. Shadow Operations had deployed additional resources during their facility infiltration, establishing secure transportation and containment protocols for all recovered persons. The subjects are being transferred to specialized medical facility with appropriate security measures. Dorn reported. Preliminary examination confirms artificial energy pathway development consistent with vessel preparation protocols. The stabilized advanced CASs provide valuable research opportunity without requiring continued experimentation. Though clinically stated, this represented significant humanitarian accomplishment alongside intelligence value. These individuals had been rescued from horrific fate while simultaneously providing critical information that might help address the broader threat. The balance between compassionate intervention and practical necessity reflected operational maturity that transcended simple institutional coldness. Their return to the capital occurred through accelerated transport arrangements, utilizing special IZED vehicles similar to those the cult employed but modified for shadow operations requirements. The journey that had required nearly 2 days on foot took nearly 8 hours through these advanced means, delivering them to secure installation beneath the capital's administrative district by late evening. Comprehensive debriefing tomorrow after necessary recovery period, Valeria informed Naruto as they completed arrival protocols. Your insights regarding interdimensional aspects remain critical to proper threat assessment and response formulation. I'll provide complete technical analysis, Naruto assured her. Though I request permission to brief the Oracle Priestess regarding our findings before formal documentation. Her divine sight may reveal connections not otherwise apparent. Valeria considered this request with appropriate professional assessment before nodding agreement. Approved with standard operational security limitations. Her Holiness's insights have proven valua BLE in previous exceptional circumstances. This authorization represented significant institutional respect for both Sword Maiden's capabilities and Naruto's judgment, rare acknowledgement from Organization typically resistant to external information sharing regardless of potential value. The exceptional nature of the threat had clearly influenced institutional flexibility in ways that might prove crucial to effective response. Upon release from Shadow Operations protocols, Naruto returned directly to the cathedral despite the late hour. The recent healing session had established stronger connection with Sword Maiden, creating sensitivity to her current condition that suggested continued difficulty during his absence. This perception proved accurate when Celeste met him at private entrance. Her expression revealing concern despite professional composure. Her Holiness will be greatly relieved by your return, she informed him quietly as they traversed secluded corridors. The nightmares have intensified significantly, accompanied by visions she describes as bleeding between worlds that correspond with your mission timeline. The connection grows stronger, Naruto observed, concern evident in his voice. Her divine sight appears increasingly attuned to the interdimensional aspects of these events. She awaits in the Azure study, Celeste continued. Though protocol would suggest postponing until morning given the hour, she was most insistent upon immediate consultation regardless of your arrival time. The Azure study appeared transformed from their previous meeting. The comfortable scholarly space now cluttered with scrolls, maps, and diagrammatic representations created under Sword Maiden's direction during vision episodes. Despite her blindness, she had a pair. NTLY dictated incredibly detailed renderings of structures, symbols, and energy patterns corresponding precisely to what Naruto had observed at the central facility. Sword Maiden herself sat beside the fireplace, her posture revealing exhaustion despite determined focus. Without formal religious vestments, dressed in simple night robe with hair loose around her shoulders, she appeared simultaneously more vulnerable and more directly engaged than her public persona typically allowed. The ceremonial blindfold had been replaced by simple cloth covering, suggesting priority of function over symbolism during this private work. Golden Sage, she acknowledged his arrival immediately, head turning toward the sound of door opening. You've seen it directly now. The convergence chamber and the gateway they construct. The statement rather than question confirmed Celeste's report of increased vision clarity during his absence. Yes, Naruto confirmed, approaching to examine the drawing spread across nearby table. Your renderings match my observations with remarkable precision. The visions became increasingly specific as you approached their central facility, Sword Maiden explained, rising despite evident fatigue to join him at the table, as though your presence strengthened connection between my awareness and these events. This correlation suggested interaction between his Akra's resonance patterns and her divine sight. Perhaps his healing work had inadvertently enhanced her natural capabilities by clearing interference from trauma-induced disruptions. If so, their Conti nude sessions might further amplify this effect, potentially providing crucial insights unavailable through conventional intelligence methods. The facility exceeds our preliminary assessment, Naruto informed her, providing comprehensive report of their observations while examining her vision-directed renderings. The gateway construction appears designed for large-scale transference between dimensions rather than merely summoning individual entities. Yes. Sword Maiden's fingers traced particular diagrams showing energy flow patterns through the central chamber. They create foundation are something vast to enter, something that requires substantial preparation before manifestation can stabilize within our reality framework. Her description aligned perfectly with Otsutsuki manifestat ion techniques from Naruto's world, particularly those employed by higher-ranked clan members whose power levels required extensive preparation before materialization could occur without dimensional destabilization. The implications suggested threat beyond even what shadow operations had assessed, potentially involving entity capable of planetary-scale impact upon successful transfer. The transfer med subjects function as living conduits, Naruto continued, noting how precisely her diagrams captured the energy extraction systems he had observed. Their artificially developed chakra pathways NNEL harvested energy into the gateway construction, channeling life force through prepared vessels, Sword Maiden confirmed grimly. A methodology I recognize from personal experience, though implemented at vastly larger scale. The reference to her captivity experience hung between them, its significance heightened by their recent healing session revelations. Your divine sight perceives connections between their current techniques and what was done to you years ago, Naruto observed carefully. More than connection, evolution of the same fundamental approach. Sword Maiden's expression reflected determined focus despite the difficult subject. What they attempted with me represented early experimentation. Their current methodology demonstrates refinement through iterative development. Learning from each attempt to improve subsequent implementation. This assessment carried disturbing implications regarding the cult's operational timeline. Rather than recent development, their activities represented continuation of research program extending back years or even decades, gradually advancing toward capabilities now approaching fruition. The leader who escaped at Riverton, Naruto noted, recalling the woman with partially transformed features including Byakugan eye. She may have been present during your captivity, perhaps even directing those early experiments personally. A possibility I've considered, Sword Maiden acknowledged, her composure remarkable given the emotional weight such connection would carry. During recent healing sessions, certain memory fragments have surfaced suggesting feminine voice giving instructions during specific procedures. Though direct confirmation remains elusive, their discussion continued into early morning hours, comparing Dao operations intelligence with Sword Maiden's vision-derived insights to construct comprehensive understanding of the threat they faced. The correlation between independently gathered information confirmed critical assessment. The cult's activities represented existential threat requiring coordinated response across institutional boundaries typically resistant to such cooperation. As dawn approached, Sword Maiden's exhaustion became increasingly evident despite her determined focus. The intensive vision episodes combined with disrupted sleep had depleted her resources beyond what even exceptional willpower could overcome. You need rest, Naruto observed gently. Continued analysis can resume after recovery period. There's little time remaining, she replied, though resignation colored her tone as physical limitations asserted themselves. Their final preparations near completion according to both vision indications and your direct observations. Which makes your continued functionality essential, Naruto countered. Your divine sight provides unique perspective unavailable through conventional means. Preserving that capability through appropriate recovery serves our purpose better than immediate continuation. The practical logic of this argument succeeded where concern for personal well-being might have failed. Sword Maiden nodded reluctant agreement, allowing Celeste to assist her toward private chambers while Naruto remained to organize their accumulated materials for subsequent analysis. She pushes beyond reasonable limits, Celeste observed quietly upon returning. Her determination to address this threat supersedes appropriate self-preservation instincts. The personal connection strengthens her commitment, Naruto replied understanding. Having experienced their methods directly, she comprehends the horror-facing potential victims more intimately than others could. Perhaps, Celeste's expression suggested additional considerations. Though USPECT her motivations extend beyond abstract humanitarian concern or even personal connection to similar suffering. Meaning, redemption, Celeste stated simply. She carries profound guilt regarding her response to Goblin threats since her traumatic experience, specifically, her reluctance to personally confront situations reminiscent of her captivity despite her considerable capabilities. This insight added significant dimension to understanding Sword Maiden's intense commitment despite physical limitations. Beyond institutional responsibility or compassionate motivation, she sought personal redemption through confronting threats connected to her deepest fears, perhaps viewing current circumstances as opportunity to reclaim agency where trauma had previously imposed paralysis. Healing sessions have supported this evolution, Naruto observed, recognizing how their work together had strengthened her capacity for directly engaging these difficult matters. As internal barriers diminish, her natural courage reasserts itself. Indeed, Celeste's expression softened momentarily. I have served Her Holiness for 7 years, witnessing both her extraordinary public strength and private struggles. Recent changes suggest healing beyond what I believed possible given previous unsuccessful attempts. The admission carried significant weight coming from someone so personally invested in Sword Maiden's well-being. That Celeste recognized meaningful improvement where numerous prior approaches had failed confirmed the effectiveness of their developing work together, progress that transcended merely functional improvement into genuine healing. Her participation remains essential to addressing this threat effectively, Naruto noted, returning focus to their immediate concerns. Her divine sight provides perspective that conventional intelligence cannot access, while her institutional position enables coordination across boundaries that would otherwise prevent unified response. A role she appears increasingly prepared to fulfill, Celeste agreed. Though continued healing support remains necessary given the intensifying connection between these events and her traumatic history. Their conversation concluded with practical arrangements for continued work following necessary recovery periods. The materials they had compiled would require secure storage while maintaining accessibility for authorized participants in the developing response effort, balancing operational security against collaborative necessity in addressing multifaceted threat. As Naruto finally retired to his own quarters for brief rest before Shadow Operations debriefing, he reflected on the rapidly evolving situation. What had begun as isolated healing request had expanded into confrontation with interdimensional threat potentially affecting both his adopted world and his original reality. Yet within this expanding complexity, the core relationship with Sword Maiden had developed unexpected depth, connection founded in mutual understanding of trauma and resilience that transcended merely professional cooperation. The threads of trust between them had strengthened through shared experience and demonstrated reliability, creating foundation for both personal healing and effective partnership against external threats. Whatever challenges lay ahead in confronting the cult's activities, this developing bond represented essential resource, healing connection that might ultimately prove as important as any tactical capability or institutional resource in addressing the darkness. Gathering at the boundaries between worlds. Chapter 3 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.